Hey everybody. Uh, YouTube was doing that thing where it doesn't let me go live, so that was kind of frustrating, but it looks like we're there. So finally made it. I don't know why that has to be a thing every time. It's like, it's like what Matt from Quantum of Conscience talks about, how life just always puts these things in your way to annoy you constantly. So it just feels like that for whatever reason. But anyway, we're live now. So let me. Hey Jay, what's up, man? First person in the chat. It's an honor. I'm actually going to be talking about the Squatterman and all that later in the video, which I, of course, learned from your excellent channel. Let's see here. Sure, should be good. All right. Hey, Severa, good to see you. Awesome, man. Well, happy to have you. So with this thumbnail, we're gonna kind of go from right to left. So I'll be hitting Superman first and the boys. Joe versus the volcano. That's gonna be a long one. If it gets like too long, or if my voice starts dying, I might have to end it after Joe versus the volcano. But then we'll be talking about Attack on Titan and this newish show From, which is really interesting. And actually, Jay, check this out. In From, they have these talismans that protect them, and I'll be getting into this later. But the talisman literally has the Squatterman on it, and then you have to hang this in your house, and then this protects your house from these like imposter invader monsters that are on the outside trying to get into the house. But if you have this Squatterman talisman hanging in your house, it's like the light or the blue beam that protects you from the evil. And they don't even explain that in the show. I only know this because I learned about the Squatterman from you. So I don't think anyone even really knows about this, but it's pretty epic. And I'll be getting into that later. So we're just going to be continuing on with this the Misty Mountain, the North Pole Mountain, and the Split Mountain, number 13. But we will be finishing this off, and it didn't really seem like enough for a video. And I tried to go into the next element of the North Pole, but it kind of got to be too long, so I just kind of went off on a tangent with the Squatterman, because it comes up in Joe versus the Volcano, which is another really epic piece of World Script Media to check out. Hey, Ghetto Twain, what's up, man? It's good to see you too. It's awesome you guys are here. So just a super quick recap of all these examples, just in case somebody's new to the channel. So we have The Dark Tower starring Matthew McConaughey, and the way they do this with the is it could be a character that has the like Marty McFly in Back to the Future. It could also be an actor that has the with Matthew McConaughey, and sometimes they even have it where the actor is the and the character they play is which I'll show you guys. But also it could be like a destination point in the movie, like the Misty Mountains in Lord of the Rings, or it could be like an object or like a company. Like just look for like the and it's almost always going to be in relation to the North Pole Mountain, because ultimately stands for Mount Meru, and the letter M is basically the symbol of a mountain, or the Split Mountain. So here we have the Antichrist character Matthew McConaughey. He's looking for Jake Chambers, the JC, the Jesus Christ character, the hero of the story. And I've talked about this a lot in the past, so I won't get too into it. In Life Force, we have another actress named Matilda May, and she's literally the blue beam, and also has a Kraken relation too. You could check her out on IMDb here, and here you can see in the basement of the church under the North Pole Mountain, she is literally shining the blue beam straight up from her. So it's like, just complete representation of the North Pole Mountain and how it switches between Antichrist and Christ rule, which is why she exemplifies both the blue beam and the Kraken, because she represents the mountain itself. And then here we see the blue beam shooting up through the church and out through the top dome of the church, because the blue beam is going to shoot through the dome of our world and then allow the Kraken to enter the world into the parts of the world while it protects the North Pole area. Back to the Future, I talked about quite a bit. And at the end of that movie, we have Marty McFly representing the North Pole Mountain. And here we have the sparks and the plasma storm, the lightning. There's always a storm in these movies on top of the pyramid, on top of the clock tower. There's always like a tower, clock tower, a bell tower, a water tower. These all represent the North Pole Mountain. and then the plasma comes down, and Marty's in his vessel that's going to be transcending space and time, and he has the pole or the spear sticking up from. Warning, my connection is unstable. Hey. I think it was buffering there, but I think it's back now. Um, all right, so not off to a good start here. They wouldn't even let me go live on YouTube, and now we're hitting the buffering issues already. So I don't know what to tell you guys. I mean, if it gets to a point where I can't stream on YouTube, then I think you guys have enough information already to, figure out the world script on your own. I don't know what to tell you. It's not up to me if I can live stream or not. um, so anyway, here's the plasma blue beam tree. We also have the 9 and the 11, the streets of fire. And Marty goes shooting into this blue beam theater where he winds up at the Assembly of Christ with Reverend John Crump. This is JC, also next to the sign that says salvation is free. So his vehicle that's transcended space and time is now at the blue beam area at the North Pole in the Assembly of Christ, which is the camp of the saints. And I've talked about that a lot in the past too, so I don't want to get overly into it. So we got Princess Bride here, where of course the character Miracle Max, played by Billy Crystal, he is involved in the resurrection of the hero. Now the hero is Jesus. It's also us, but Jesus's first symbol was the Chi Rho, which is likely where the word hero comes from, and it's also us with Christ in us as the hero, and the hero of the story basically. And the resurrection of Jesus is being done at the North Pole Mountain. And in the Sword in the Stone, this is of course representative of the blue beam. This is the sword in the stone. This is also a big Mandela effect where the stone was turned into an anvil, which relates to the forge. We are forging our sword. We're forging our blue beam to connect ourselves better with God or with Jesus. And one of the main antagonists or the main antichrist character is this Madame Mim, and she's this witch under the giant black hat. But this is Rupus Nigra, the black rock, the black mountain at the North Pole, and she's in control of that area at this time. And then she's doing this curtsy pose here, like the apex dome. And there's a lot of symbolism that I've talked about here in the past too. I don't want to get overly into it, just showing you guys all these examples of the so we can move on. Lord of the Rings, I talked about. You got the Misty Mountains, and when they can't conquer the storm at the top of the Misty Mountains, that is brought about by the imposter wizard at the top of the Black Tower, they have to go down under the mountain where they learn the truth. This is where we learn the truth, under the North Pole Mountain, and they have to go into the mines of Moria, where they're attacked by a kraken from the Black Mirror water. So this is all the same symbolism, and I've talked about that too in the past. So if you are interested in any of these movies, definitely check out my previous live streams. This is all in relation to Mount Meru also, that you can look up and check out. And this big anime, Hunter x Hunter, which I also pointed out has had a couple Mandela effects done to the title, which we actually watched happen in real time, the supernatural editing of our reality. You can literally watch reality being changed right before your eyes if you're aware of it and observant. And the main villain in this story is Meru M. So it's kind of like an inverse of Mount Meru, because he's the Antichrist with the needle, and he leads the insect army, and he also hypnotizes mass groups of people to become like his zombie slave army, basically. So this is the army of the dead, or of the spiritually dead, the Antichrist army. And we also have these Nativity of our Lord, Christian iconographies where they're showing literally Mother Mary, who's also like the giving birth, the virginal birth to Jesus, who is the blue beam, inside and under the mountain cave at the North Pole, and then the blue beam shoots up through the mountain into the apex dome. And there's multiple different versions of this you could find on your own. I've talked about this too in the past. This is also something I learned from channel. FLCL. I think this logo is Mandela affected as well. Remember the F being separated here, and I think the two L's were as tall as the F and the C as well. So they don't even look like L's anymore, frankly. But this FLCL Fooly Cooly anime is another huge. It's very surreal, but it's also major world script media, and the in the town that it takes place, they have this giant iron mountain. So it's like the metal mountain, and it's called Medical Mechanica. So there's your Mountain, and then all these things. I talked about this anime quite a bit in previous streams. So if you're interested, check that out. Here you can look it up on your own, Medical Mechanica. In the Matrix trilogy, when Neo is talking to the Oracle, she's saying when a program is no longer needed, it could either choose to hide in the Matrix or it can return to the source. And then Neo says, the source, that's the machine mainframe. And she says, yes. So there's your at the source. And how do they gain access to the They have to go through a portal door inside the dark tower. And he says, the key maker says, there is a building. Inside this building, there's a level where no elevator can go and no stair can reach. So it's not a physical portal. It's a supernatural portal. And then at the end of the trilogy, we see the Neo standing at the Split Mountain during the plasma storm. And he's at the source again. And he plugs into that machine mainframe. And that's how he's able to defeat Smith, or the Antichrist character. And in the Abyss, we have this actress, Mary Mastrantonio. So there's your And here's they're getting ready to go deep sea. This is by James Cameron, who's also the JC, another big world scripter like Steven Spielberg and Stephen King. Here's the North Pole dartboard symbol with the concentric circles and the bullseye in the center. And the villain is actually named Coffee, like the black goo, and he goes crazy while they're deep underwater. And then there's a scene where Mary Mastrantonio, the character, has to sacrifice herself in order to save both her and Dead Harris. But she doesn't know if she's going to actually be saved because one of them has to drown, basically. So she drowns and dies, and then Ed Harris, swims her up to the surface, and they resurrect her. So again, we have the resurrection of the Sorry, my computer is now giving me all these messages about drivers and things. All right, so anyway, let's see how many distractions we can get within the first 10 minutes here. All right, so they're resurrecting her. This is often something you'll see is the defibrillator being used, CPR, bringing people back to life, and they're almost always like a Christ character or an character. The mountain, the blue beam. It's the blue beam retracts down into the world, and then it resurrects and shoots back up, and then she's back to life. And she's also this Mary Mastrantonio actress. She's also in Robin Hood, where she plays Maid Marian. So here we have the actress playing the role in the movie. And basically the Christ character, Robin Hood, and the Antichrist character, the Sheriff of Nottingham, are fighting over which one is going to get to marry the North Pole Mountain. So it's, again, this battle between Christ and Antichrist. And at the end of the movie, Robin Hood is thrown down into the fire where he rises from the ashes like the phoenix. And then he stabs his sword through the center of the Sheriff of Nottingham. So this is like the blue beam shooting through the center of the Kraken and into the Apex Dome and becoming, married to the Mountain. And then we go back to having Christ rule instead of Antichrist rule, which is obviously the world we were all born into. Mad Max, I talked about a lot in the previous stream. Max's last name is Rockatansky. So we have this character, and his name is literally Rock because he represents the Black Rock Mountain at the center of the world. And when the story starts out, we have the Skull and Bones, also representing the North Pole, the X and the Skull Mountain. And I've talked about all that in the previous streams. And he starts out the story basically in paradise. So here we have the lone house, the lone temple, and he's with his wife, and his wife is Jessie. So we have Mad Max, The Rock, the and he's married to Jessie or a JC or a Jesus. And she's also the feminine energy. And he's also standing next to this seahorse. And seahorses are symbolic of our memory because seahorses and cornucopias both look like our hippocampus. So when you see a seahorse or a cornucopia, and this also plays into the Mandela effect with the Fruit of the Loom logo, and the seahorse emoji has disappeared, and the first cornucopia at the first Thanksgiving is no longer a thing anymore. So we have this memory being erased, basically, for most people. I mean, if you're following the Mandela effect, then your memory is probably working, but most people you've probably noticed don't have very good memories anymore, or maybe they never did. But anyway, we have the marriage of MM and JC here. This is also like the character Jesse in Breaking Bad. He's the Jesus character. It's like Jesse, JC. I think it's also said that Jesus is from the line of Jesse, and there's like the Jesse tree and all that symbolism. So I've talked about Mad Max a lot in the past. So if you want to check that out, I think it's my previous stream. Also Mega Man. So we have the MM character here, and also the pyramidal design of the logo, just like the Mad Max logo. And in Japan, Mega Man is known as Rockman. So here we have the MM character relating to the Rock. And if you look for a normal explanation, the regular world explanation, they'll say it's because of rock and roll. But I say it's because of the North Pole, Black Rock Mountain. And of course, the Antichrist villain that he has to face has the big W on top of the Skull Mountain, the Skull Castle. There's also the Twin Pillars and a bunch of other symbols in this castle. This is just Mega Man 2. In all these Mega Man games, there's always like Dr. Wily. He's always in one of these Skull Castle mountains because he's the Antichrist ruler of the North Pole at the time. And then you're the hero Mega Man who's going to change it to the Christ rule of things. And at the end of Mega Man 2, you literally have to face a hologram alien who turns out to be Dr. Wily. And then you change the black and red rule of the Apex Dome to the blue and white rule of the Apex Dome. And Dr. Wily is defeated, and now we're back to Christ rule with the blue beams shooting up. I mean, this never made sense to me, this inverted dome at the end of Mega Man 2, because I had this game as a kid, and it was one of my favorite games, but I never really realized what they were showing here, you know. But now it makes so much sense now that I know about the Apex Dome from Jay's channel. Again, he's got great videos on the Apex Dome and a lot of these topics. So I also talked about these 28 years later movies where the main character Spike. So I think when you see spiked balls or a character named Spike, they're representing the CV, which is also I think Jesus' seeds of the tree of life, basically, that he sent out in 2019. And he's climbing to the top of the Skull Mountain. And he's going to see the doctor. And when you see a doctor, that's usually a God character or a Jesus character as well. His mother is sick, so he's going to see the doctor. And I talked about this quite a bit, so I don't want to get too into it. But here you have the tree in the middle of the split mountain here, where they're going to see the doctor at the Skull Mountain. And they're crossing the bridge, and they're passing the communications tower, being chased by zombies. And here they meet the doctor, who's Ralph Fiennes, and he's the one who's put together this Skull Mountain that he calls Memento Mori. So here we have the MM, and this means remember death in Latin. And here they're doing the M handhold as they walk to the Skull Mountain. And here's the giant Skull Mountain monument inside the circle. So this all represents the North Pole area. And I talked about this even more in the previous stream if you're interested. Harry Potter. These are the some of the posters. You have the Elder Wand represents the blue beam, and of course it's Christ versus Antichrist, and they're like the twins as well. And one of the main teachers, is this Minerva McGonagall, and she's of course the MM also. And at the end of the story, when Snape is ruling the North Pole Castle, he's the Antichrist ruler. Everything is dark and bleak and black, and the children are all scared, and that the heroes come back with Harry, but also Minerva, the MM. They chase away the Antichrist ruler of the North Pole Castle, and he goes through the glass, breaking the glass. This is like breaking the firmament. And then she controls the castle after that for the end of the movie. So we have the switching of the MM mountain between Christ and Antichrist rule, or Antichrist to Christ rule in this case. And of course, they also have the Ministry of Magic in Harry Potter. And the symbol, and this is, of course, the MM mountain, and they have the symbol of the big M with the blue beam. It's not blue, of course, but it's this, spear shooting up with the eternal light in the center at the split mountain. And in Stranger Things, we have this character, Max Mayfield. She's the MM. She also is known for being good at video games, where she calls herself Mad Max. So this, in my opinion, is now, of course, the referencing, it's all about like referencing the 80s and all this nostalgia and all that. But on a deeper, spiritual spellcrafting level, they're combining their MM character with the Mad Max MM character of all the Mad Max movies. And they're, combining this symbolism through multiple, pieces of media. and also and I talked about the Stranger Things MM a lot in the past previous stream too. If you want to check that out, there's also the actor Matthew Modine, who's the MM Antichrist ruler of the North Pole castle, essentially, where he has all the children imprisoned and he's using their energy and all that. And here's Matthew Modine, and the place that he runs is this X headquarters with the communication towers on top. So again, we have the X representing the North Pole, and it's ruled by the MM. And here they're doing the M handhold, and it's all the same symbolism. All right, so that's just a recap of what we talked about in previous streams. I'm going to just check out the chat real quick. Oh, hey, no worries, man. Get a Twain's at work, but listening. Yeah, it's awesome, man. I'm happy to have you here. Thanks, Jay. Appreciate it, bro. Hey, Exheliocentric, good to see you. Good to see you, KYOST. Final Grace, good to see you. Yeah, Mega Man, the Mega Man games and the Mario games and the Ninja Turtle games. Those were all my jam when I was little. Hey, Ether, good to see you too. Absolutely. Yeah, the key represents the blue beam also, for sure. All right, so the boys. I just wanted to talk about this because the series ended recently, so I'm going to spoil the whole thing in case you're watching the show or something currently. But if you're into the show, then you've had plenty of time to watch it, I assume. But yeah, so I talked about this show in the previous stream because it relates to the twin pillars and the central pillar, as I've talked about. So here, let me show you. So there's this character MM. His name is Mother's Milk, which I've said is a weird name, but everyone just calls him MM. And of course, he's got the giant X shirt and the black and white. Also, this all represents the North Pole and the Paradise painting too. But that's not exact. He's not always next to this painting, obviously. But then, so these characters here, they're the boys, and I talked about this in the past, how they all represent, the pillars basically. So we have MM. He's the central pillar, and again, he's wearing a black and white shirt with the X and the circles and all that. And this is like their main publicity photo too. And you could even say this is like the blue beam up here. So Huey here, he's like the hero, the fish out of water character. So he represents us. And then the three main characters who are like the boys are these three in the back. So you have MM, he's the central pillar. Then you have Frenchie, who's the right pillar, and he's like the more Jesus-like character. He's, the one who cares more and that type of thing. He's more about preservation, I should say. And then Butcher is the left pillar character. So he's like the more Antichrist character. He's the destroyer. He always wants to kill everybody and all that. And then this character here, Kamiko, they find her in the first season, and she's basically the blue beam. She represents like that princess energy that's caged. They literally find her in a cage. She's a prisoner. And then she becomes part of the boys. And she's also supernatural because the blue beam is supernatural. And she's kind of like Wolverine in the X-Men, if you're familiar with that. So she can get like, shot or stabbed or something, and then she just heals. So she also represents that resurrection, healing energy of the blue beam. And she often, will die, but then come back to life. And these are like the superheroes that the boys are always fighting against. But this character on the left, her name is Starlight, and she actually becomes one of the heroes or one of the boys also. So I just wanted to bring attention to her because I'm going to show you what happens at the end of this show. And her name being, Starlight, she also represents that feminine, blue beam energy, but also like the star that you'll see at the top of the central pillar in a lot of these, esoteric paintings and things like that. So I guess a lot of people at the end of the last season had a problem with Homelander basically just literally becoming Trump. But I was saying that he was the Trump character from the first season, and you could see it when he gives speeches to people. And here I have like the enough is enough card and Trump, and that's basically, I don't know if he says enough is enough, but it's like that's basically the gist of his speeches, where he's like, haven't you had enough? We need a new leader and all that to protect the people and to protect America and all that. And this card, enough is enough, this Illuminati card is actually really interesting too, because it's got like a bullet basically going right across his ear area. And then if you read the bottom, it says our snipers can drop you at any time. So again, predictive programming for the sniper event that happened, which was obviously totally fake, in case you couldn't tell. It was like He might as well have had like a ketchup packet emptied out on his ear there. And then when he took the bandage off his ear, there was no injury. Obviously, I actually thought they were going to go through the trouble of surgically cutting out a little chunk of his ear, but they didn't even bother because they know the public is so like goldfish. They can't remember anything, and they don't care to remember. So he does the Christ pose. He's also doing the charismatic leader pose. Just this is Trump. This is the charismatic leader pose from the Illuminati cards. And here they show him from the back doing the charismatic leader pose. And so he's basically like Trump if he had Superman powers, essentially. And he's also all about this V, which is like this blue liquid that imitates the blue beam, but it's in the small needle, the deadly needle, the spiritually deadly needle. So this compound V, it's named after the company Vought, but the compound V, it's the other V word, if you know what I mean. It's delivered through needles. So then this character Butcher, who's the Antichrist left pillar character, he keeps taking this V, and then Huey's like, "Hey, you got like black goo coming out of your ears, literally." So he's like filled with black goo, and he becomes the Kraken from taking too much V. So here at the end of the fourth season, he took too many V needles. This is in my needle video if you're interested, and he's got literally tentacles coming out of his heart. So he's like a giant Kraken now, and that's his power from taking too many Vs. And he also is the left pillar character, which would be the Antichrist character. So in this latest season, in the last couple episodes, they start equating Homelander, who's the Trump character, to Jesus. So they have like this audience here that they're showing. This is like when they show people like a movie before it comes out or a commercial or something to see what they think of it, like a focus group. So they haven't finished this video yet, so they have like this ridiculous thing with the VFX and all that, and Jesus is literally talking to Homelander, and he's saying, we need a real savior with real American values, someone who can conquer evil once and for all, and he gives him like the crown of thorns, and then Homelander's like, I accept, and they have like the stupid eagle with the United States flag on it and all that, but this is basically Trump, and something that I think is extremely important that almost no one talks about, and I learned this from Jurassic Liars channel, is that Trump, if you look up his family lineage, he's literally from the bloodline of Christ. And I'm not talking about, Jesus when I say that. His grandmother, her name was Elizabeth Christ. So like Trump, who I think is the Antichrist on the world stage, who also is the father of the V, which is like the Antichrist, needle. He's literally from the Christ lineage. So, I mean, I don't know why more people don't bring that up. I think it's amazing. So anyway, this character, he's like a lackey for Homelander, and he looks back to see if the audience is buying it, and they're actually not buying it, which is something that I think we've all seen happening lately too, where like even like the normie audiences aren't exactly buying the story anymore, and not that they're necessarily waking up, but everything has just become so ridiculous that most people, I think, are tuning out. There are people who still, think politics and voting and all that's real, but I mean, it's just everything's so over the top now that I've noticed, people in my own life who are kind of like normie. Or like NPC type, minded people, even they're just like not buying the stories that are being shown to us, on the big screen anymore. So they cut to the White House with the pyramidal top, and they have an Elon Musk character as well, and he's wearing the black hat. We believe in Homelander, and he's saying that he's a disruptor. He disrupts. And here he's saying he wants to talk to Homelander about white fertility rates. And they say, why don't you go wait in the garden? And of course, this would be like the Antichrist version of the garden, but this is when the Antichrist rules the White House, which is ruling the North Pole castle or temple. So he's saying, go wait in the garden. I'm going to talk to Homelander. So Homelander's like, who was that? And he's saying, and this character's name is Oh Father, because his superpower is having a projecting voice. So he's like the Homelander's voice, to bring people to him into thinking that he actually is Jesus. So he's saying it's Gunter Van Ellis, and he has the EL in his name, just like Elon has the EL in his name, which is the word for God. So he's the world's richest man. And you can see all the symbolism too on Oh Father's outfit. I don't want to get overly into it, but he's like the imposter, blue and yellow and white Columbia colors with the pyramid and all that. He's got 17 children, amateur astronauts. So they're obviously talking about Elon, and Homelander couldn't care less, but he's saying, they're the ruling class of America, and in order to build Homelander's church, they need their support. So Homelander's like, does he even care? Is he even a believer that I'm Jesus? And this guy's like, I can convince them with enough time. So this character, the Deep, comes in, who's like a lackey of Homelander also, and he's also representative of the Kraken, which I'll show you guys. His power is he's like an evil version of Aquaman, basically. So they're arguing over the Crusades and bringing up Indiana Jones and stuff like that, while Homelander's out here with Elon Musk, and he basically shoots him up into the air, and then comes back down, and he's like, what did you do? So he's like, he's an astronaut, so I took him to space. So it's pretty funny, actually. I actually liked the ending of The Boys. I was ready to hate it, but I thought it was pretty good. So Homelander's, saying he doesn't need billionaires. So this is like Trump kicking Elon out of the White House. So they literally have Homelander, sitting in the Oval Office at the end of the show. And he's trying to push his Homelander.church, because he wants everyone to think that he's the second coming of Jesus, the Antichrist. So he represents, Trump. He represents the needle, and he represents the Antichrist, which is all what we've been seeing on the world stage. This is just fiction and reality, going back and forth. Where we're in a world where we can't really tell the difference between fiction and reality, unless you have a high level of spiritual discernment. And there's predictive programming, but there's also concurrent programming and reinforcing programming. So before something happens, there's the predictive programming, but then while something happens, there's these shows like The Boys, while it's literally happening, and then even after things happen, they still keep showing you these elements of the world script. So Homelander's reading from this teleprompter. He's saying, accept my truth and be welcomed into the land of milk and honey. So this is like, you'll be in Homelander's paradise if you just, bow to him. But then to people who don't think he's Jesus, he offers oblivion, which is basically the abyss. And he says, when the world is cold and dead, he'll remain God of the ashes. So this is like that Phoenix symbolism, or like the dark Phoenix symbolism. And then Butcher breaks his way into the Oval Office, and now it's Butcher versus Homelander, the final fight, and Kamiko is there as well, and I'll explain why. And they have this whole fight in the Oval Office with the tentacles and all that, and she's basically turned herself into an atom bomb, which is what's going to remove Homelander's powers so he could finally be killed. And when she goes off, this happens, and then they eventually kill Homelander. But then going back to what all these characters represent. So in order to do this, these are the boys, and they're looking into a chamber where they're radiating Kamiko, and she can't be killed. Like I said, if she gets killed, she just resurrects and comes back. So she's taking in all this, atomic energy, basically this radiation, and she's saying she's okay. And this is also like what we saw with Captain America when he's inside this like cocoon, and she's basically in a cocoon right now. She's being bombarded with all these things, but she's withstanding it, and that's what we have to do. We're basically all in these like spiritual symbolic cocoons right now, and we're all being tortured and traumatized in different ways, but we need to keep withstanding it because there's a reason for all this. There's a point to all of this. I know some people don't think there is, but I think there is. And the right pillar character, Frenchie, he ends up having to sacrifice himself so that the other heroes can live. So this is the right pillar dying to sacrifice himself, and then ultimately becoming that central pillar. So this is like what we see in like Star Wars, like the Phantom Menace, where you have like Qui-Gon Jinn with the green lightsaber, Obi-Wan with the blue lightsaber, and then Darth Maul with the two red lightsabers. So Darth Maul is like the Antichrist red pillar takeover, where he has two red pillars. Qui-Gon is like the right pillar, green pillar, which is what Frenchie would be. So they both die. Qui-Gon dies. And then and they also throw Darth Maul down into the abyss, the bottomless pit. And I've shown this before too, which is why I'm just saying it really quick. And then this gives rise to Obi-Wan, who's the new Christ character with the blue beam, the central pillar blue beam. So the right pillar, dies. This is like the movie, John dies in the end. The name John represents the right pillar. So it's like the Christ sacrifice, but then there's the resurrection into the central pillar, which is also what we saw with the September event in New York, where you have the two pillars coming down, the North and the South Tower, and then the one pillar being resurrected in its place, which they were originally calling the Phoenix Tower. So here we see at the end of the show also Starlight. Now she also represents the blue beam, and she's shooting through the Deep, who represents the Kraken, or the Antichrist Kraken. And so the blue beam shooting through the Kraken, and then they go through the glass. So this is the breaking of the dome firmament glass again. And then he gets sent out into the ocean, where he's basically turned on all the ocean life that he used to love. So now the ocean life wants to kill him, and it's kind of disturbing what happens. I mean, not really, but I don't want to show it on YouTube. But anyway, he's being encircled by sharks, and then he gets wrapped up by these tentacles, and then he gets killed, which I don't want to show, and then he gets pulled down into the watery abyss. So here we have, this Antichrist lackey character getting wrapped up by the tentacles and pulled down into the abyss and killed, which is symbolic of the spiritual death. And note that he was also just shot through the dome by the blue beam. And then Butcher, he also has to die, of course, because he represents the left pillar Antichrist. So there's a scene towards the end where Butcher, even though they got what they wanted, he just keeps wanting to destroy because he represents the left pillar of destruction. So Huey, the hero, has to shoot him. And he's like, it's all right. I gave you no choice. I wasn't going to stop, all the blood and the stuff that I put you through, and you stayed yourself no matter what I did. So like all these boys' characters, they represent like the three pillars that we all, have. So no matter what Huey's, left pillar did, he stayed himself. He stayed true to himself and kept being the hero. And then at the end, what do we also see? The character, he lives and he gets married. So here we have the marriage of the again, which is something that comes up often. The is, usually getting married, like I said, with like Maid Marian. It's also with involved with resurrection and the blue beam and the Kraken, of course. But in this case, it's, a happy marriage, obviously. And Huey, the hero, he gets married to Starlight. So here we have the hero being with the blue beam now, and they do the handhold at the end of the show, and then she flies off, and that's that. But it's just amazing because I was talking about how those characters represent those pillars, and those episodes that I just showed you hadn't even come out yet. So then the episodes come out, and I watch them, and they just completely confirm what I was just saying before. And it's not about me being right or anything. It's about this is what the truth of the world is. It is what it is. And it's shown to us constantly in all this world script media. So Superman 2, here you see he represents the blue beam, of course. I know a lot of people in the truth community like to say that Superman is like a antichrist character, but I think he's a Christ character. And of course, these characters like Superman have been around for like 100 years almost. So you're going to be able to find a lot of things that relate to Superman. And of course, he does have some antichrist like things, like how he falls to earth. Like that's something that a lot of people like to point out. But in my opinion, he represents Christ and the blue beam. And when he's a baby and he's being sent from his planet, he's literally in the spiked ball, like the CV, which is the seeds of the tree of life. And then he becomes the blue beam as an adult after he goes to the crystal cave at the North Pole, where he speaks to his dead father, who is his spiritual father. So he's basically at the crystal cave at the central North Pole, speaking with God, which is what we all need to be doing. Hopefully, you guys have all been doing it. Because I think we're about near the end of the world, frankly, although I don't know exactly when it's going to end, but I would imagine in the next few years. I feel like it has to at least start ending while Trump is around, because Trump is always built up as this, he's like the main boss. He's, the main villain of these stories is always like some kind of Trump character and or Antichrist character with the V and all that. So, I mean, I think we're about at the end of this tribulation period here. So in Superman 2, they go to Niagara Falls, and the waterfall is symbolic of the North Pole, which I haven't really gotten to yet, but I've mentioned it. And this kid's got this hat with Niagara Falls on it, and this is also a Mandela effect because I've always heard and seen Niagara Falls without this middle A. It was Niagra, so now it's got 3 A's in it. So an extra A was put into this giant waterfall. And the name Niagara means like the strait or the neck of the land. So this is like the straight and narrow path, in my opinion. And the neck is like, getting to the top of our, chakra ladder at the top of our head, which would be the blue, where the blue beam also would be. And that's the waterfall or the reverse waterfall. And Christopher Reeve, Superman, he also, his name is Mandela affected also because his name used to be Christopher Reeves with an S at the end. And they even wrote on the inside of his outfit, it says Christopher Reeves, like the prop department or the costume department wrote his name in it, and it's wrong. And like his best friend, Robin Williams, says Christopher Reeves. And you can see a lot. I think check out, Moneybags and Brian Stavely and a few other people have videos on the Christopher Reeves change. But I remember it clearly being Reeves with an S. But I don't want to get too into the Mandela effect in this video. It will be in the future. So anyway, they're at this Niagara Falls, and it's Clark and what's her name, Lois, and he's saying, "Hey, look, everyone's holding hands, and they're doing the M handhold." So he's like, "Hey, maybe we should hold hands too." So they do the M handhold at the North Pole waterfall location. And we also have like the spirals here in the gate. So this kid's playing around, and he's obviously going to fall. So he falls down into the waterfall. And this is interesting too, because it shows how rainbows are indeed a Mandela effect. Because this rainbow here in Superman 2, this is a natural rainbow. It's not a special effect or anything. And it's got red on top and violet on the bottom. So, this movie is from late 70s, early 80s. So, it's not that rainbows have changed recently. It's that they got Mandela affected. Because rainbows for me used to have violet on top, and I've shown a ton of examples of other people showing violet on top rainbows in the past. So Superman, Clark turns into Superman in the phone booth, which I don't want to get too into now, but he flies down into the waterfall to save the kid, and they show this boat, and this boat is called the Maid of the Mist 4. So here's your MM, vessel in this MM location. And I'm not sure about the 4 or the IV, frankly, but definitely the MM. So he dives down, rescues the kid, and he goes down and up like the blue beam and like the Phoenix resurrection, and he saves the child. And this is kind of funny too. They say, "What a nice man." Of course, he's Jewish. I don't really understand that, frankly. But Christopher Reeves wasn't Jewish, as far as I know, so I'm not really sure exactly what they're getting at. But Superman was actually made by a couple of Jewish men who say that he was originally an allegory for Moses, actually. But then he became more of a Christ character as things went on, and they started making these movies. And here's the MM made of the mist, and he's saying goodbye to the kid he just saved. And this is also in Superman 2. They have the Artemis 2 mission, which is what we just saw in real life. Again, fiction and reality are mirroring each other, and predictive programming as well. And they say like the whole world's forgotten about us. Like they purposefully wanted people to forget about all these moon missions, and they programmed them into this movie. Like this movie came out within like 10 or so years of the moon missions, and they're already trying to get people to forget about caring about these moon missions because they didn't want to keep faking it. So they have this moon mission, the Artemis, and this is where the black imposters come from the other planet. They're wearing these black outfits, and you can see this like black versus white symbolism, and they're imposter humans. They're not actually humans; they're aliens. And we also have the eclipse and the conjunction symbolism going on in the background, and they destroy the space vessel and create the sparks, and then they lose contact. So here's the communication being lost. I don't want to get overly into this, but we have the eclipse symbolism again. This is the merging of worlds. And here then they cut to the prison where Lex Luthor is being held. He's like the Antichrist character, of course, the LL, and the guards create the eclipse on the light because we're going to be having merging of worlds again here. And they're playing chess, which also comes up a lot, and it's the black and white checkerboard floor symbolism, but also like the dance floor, basically the symbolism and all that. And then we have this also being eclipsed because it was a hologram, and Lex Luthor was actually faking still being in his cell. And so just saying multiple eclipse symbolisms in a row because this is all about worlds merging, and his world's about to merge with Superman's because he's going to the north to check out his crystal cave. And I'll get into that in the future. I've talked about it in the past too, but just point being that they're going north to where Superman's fortress of solitude is. And then at the end of the movie, it's really interesting. You have Superman flying the flag back to the White House, but the flag is attached to this small dome. And I remember there being a small dome on top of the White House, but now if you check, there never was a small dome on top of the White House. So I think that's a big Mandela effect. It also relates to the North Pole and the small dome that's going to be put, around the North Pole by the blue beam. And what do we have here? We have this piece of amazing residue where the blue beam character, the Christ character Superman, is putting the small dome over the White House. So this is all what's going to happen at the North Pole in the Camp of the Saints. And it's happened, I think, in the past as well. This is like a world resetting that keeps switching between Christ and Antichrist rule. And then he looks basically at the camera and he says, sorry, I've been away for so long. I won't let you down again. So very powerful message. And as I've said in previous streams, I think that God leaves these certain pieces of residue as further confirmation of things, because he could have just erased this scene from Superman 2 also, but instead he erased the dome from ever being on top of the White House, but kept this scene in Superman 2 where the blue beam returns the dome to the top of the White House. And at the end of the movie, we literally see the blue beam rising up off of the Earth, and they don't show the whole globe. They just show what could still be a flat Earth with a dome over it. And he's punching through the top and rising up off the Earth like the blue beam does. Like, where is he going? In the context of the movie, why would Superman just be flying off into space? It doesn't make any sense. But it makes total sense as him being representative of the blue beam shooting up off of the Earth into space. All right, so we have this going back to this split mountain symbolism again. I'm just going to show you a few other things. So one thing to keep in mind is the split mountain often represents this North Pole mountain, but it doesn't always have to be a split mountain. It could, as I've shown in the past, you have like the tree or the cut off tree. It could be like a flat top mountain or like a tabletop mountain, and it could also be like a split mountain, which is like a volcano. And something that Jay talks about a lot too is it depends on when you're talking about it, and it also depends on what angle you're viewing it at. So you could have a split mountain that looks like a flat top mountain, like this Close Encounters mountain, but then maybe from the side it looks like a split mountain. So it all depends on who you're hearing it from, what culture is talking about it, what histories and all that. Just saying, a lot of different things represent the North Pole Mountain, and obviously, if it was always just represented by a split mountain, then there wouldn't really be much of a puzzle to solve. It would just be too obvious, or it's not always like a skull mountain, but sometimes it is a skull mountain because that represents the land of the dead, the land of the Antichrist, and this world of death that we're in. And when Jesus returns, it returns to a world of life. So that's why it goes from like a cut off stump of a tree that's likely petrified and all that into a mountain, but then it becomes the full living tree again when the blue beam returns. And it also could be like this X symbol, because the X is like the North Pole, which I've shown before. It looks like the four continents and the four rivers and all that, and also the giant tree like in Shawshank Redemption. And what does Red, who represents the left pillar, find at the bottom of the tree is he finds the black rock. And Andy, I just picked up this meme really quick, but he says, find that spot in the base of it, you'll find a rock that has no earthly business. In a Maine hayfield, a piece of black volcanic glass. There's something buried under it I want you to have. So he finds the truth of how to get to paradise by finding this black rock under the North Pole tree. And the name Shawshank, let's see. Is this hard to see? Sorry, it's just I thought it would be easier to read. It's kind of tough to read stuff on the fly. But anyway, the Shawshank Redemption is basically like the Tree Mountain Redemption, and it's a small wood, a thicket, but it's also usually like a pyramidal thicket. Uh, the point here we go. Yeah, projecting point of a hill. So the Shaw is like the wood, and then the shank is like the pointy hill. So it's basically the tree pyramidal mountain at the North Pole redemption. And this is also like the resurrection, and it's the redemption of Red. So then Andy, I don't think I intended to put all this in here, but so Andy's like the brave warrior, and he also, and the name Dufresne, Dufresne means from the ash tree, so he's like the brave phoenix warrior from the prominent ash tree. So yeah, I've talked about all that in the past too. If you're interested, check out my video. I think it's called "The Rain Dance of the Mandela Effect." I have the whole Shawshank Redemption scene in there. Then Red gets to paradise, where they board, or they get to the blue and yellow vessel, and you have the twin pillars merged, or you also have the redeemed, lost man finding the Jesus character on the shores of paradise. It's also the twin pillars merging on the shores of paradise. And in this movie Atlantis, this Disney movie, you have the huge. I mean, this is basically the Shawshank right here. It's like the pointy, mountain on the concentric circle and all that. It looks kind of like trees and all that too. And here we have the pyramid poster with the blue beam shooting up from the center. And the North Pole Mountain here is depicted as like a giant tree stump. So I'm just saying that the North Pole Mountain can be a bunch of different things. Don't just be like hung up that it could only be like a split mountain. But I'm going to show you a bunch of split mountain examples here. So here we have the small dome put over it to protect from the. You see these like smoke tentacles being shot at the dome. Like keep that in mind for later in the video if I can get to it. And then we have the blue beam, princess character arriving on the concentric circles, and here she's coming. She's coming from the clouds, like up to down. So the blue beam is usually going to go from down to up, but they don't always show it the exact same way. And then she's even wearing the yellow, blue, and white Columbia outfit, and she has the crystal. And they do the handhold at the end of the movie. So in Narnia, here's some examples of the split mountain. We have the split mountain, which I showed in the. This is like that number 13 title card here. This is where the White Witch lives, and one of the reasons why the North Pole is often described as a split mountain is because of what we're told in the Bible. So in Zechariah, it says, on that day, his feet, Jesus' feet, will stand on the Mount of Olives, east of Jerusalem. And remember, east can mean up. So above Jerusalem, and the Mount of Olives will be split in two from east to west. So east to west, I think, means more up and down. And it forms a great valley with half the mountain moving to the north and half the mountain moving to the south. So this is like the north and south pillars. North and south would be left and right. And this is symbolically speaking. Of course, north, east, west, and south means something different if you're looking at like just like a flat map, or if someone's just telling you directions to get to the nearest, gas station or something. But in terms of the Bible and all this symbolism, east is up, west is down, and then north and south are left and right. And here we see a depiction of Jesus standing on top of the Mount of Olives and splitting it up and down like the blue beam. And we also have this quote from Matthew. At that moment, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth quaked, the rocks split, the graves were opened. So this is another thing that's going to happen, is the dead is going to be resurrected. And the bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. So when this Jesus' life force returns, this blue beam, it's going to resurrect all these people who have been dead. And it's also resurrecting the spiritually dead people who aren't physically dead, which is something that happened to me. And probably you too, if you're listening to this. So on Kong Skull Island, they're making the pyramid at the bottom. We got, I've talked about this before, but we got, the twins. We got, Kong being like the mountain under the dome and all that. So in order to get to the North Pole split mountain, they have to fly through this giant perpetual storm. So they fly through the storm. It's the plasma storm. Their compasses are going crazy, which I'll talk about in the future. And here's the plasma storm. And when they emerge from the plasma storm, the end of the world, Armageddon event, they get to the giant split mountain in the mist. And it looks like a letter M too. And also Smoky Mountains, that's another Mandela effect where the E was taken out. So I've seen the Smoky Mountains, written down, quite a bit. And it always had the E. Much like how Smokey the Bear still has the E, but now it doesn't have the word the in the middle. So there's a lot of smoke-related Mandela effects and a lot of mountain-related Mandela effects, which I've talked about the mountain ones but in these live streams, but I haven't got to the smoke yet. But I have talked about them. If you're interested, check out my keywords of the Mandela effect videos from the past. All right, so this Star Wars movie, Rogue One, here we have like the Skull Mountain under the dome. And the Antichrist character in Star Wars is, of course, Darth Vader, the Dark Father. And we have this ship flying to where Darth Vader's, headquarters is, his dark, temple. And it's this, split mountain temple. And then we have this, messenger for Vader. He's in the Black Mirror. And then he goes to speak to Vader. And here we have, the pyramidal steps. This is what you're looking at is basically the same thing as the woman in the Columbia Pictures logo. So she's on top of these pyramidal steps at the North Pole. And then this guy bows down here. So we have the twins on either side. And then we have the blue beam and the mist. And this is where the, Vader is in control, though he's the Antichrist ruler. So this isn't representative of the blue beam exactly. It's more like the imprisoned blue beam. And then you have the Kraken tentacles and all that. And the Antichrist is ruling this dark tower. And he goes to speak with this guy who's one of the main characters in Rogue One. And they're having a conversation about the Death Star. And then when Vader leaves, The guy's like, so am I still in command? And notice the concentric circles and all that too. And he's trying to like kind of push Vader, and then all of a sudden he starts choking. And Vader says, "Be careful not to choke on your aspirations." And he's doing his, Darth Vader, choking, hand thing because he's using the Force to choke the guy. But this is also the Antichrist, causing people to not be able to breathe. So this is like the same thing that happens in the Dark Tower, where the Matthew McConaughey character, who's the Antichrist character of that, he's causing people not to breathe. He like whenever someone gets in his way, he basically says stop breathing, and they fall over and they can't breathe. So you'll often see the Antichrist characters, causing or not being able to breathe, or causing other people to not be able to breathe, or they can't breathe themselves. There's even a part in the prequels where Anakin, who's the Antichrist, he's talking to Padme, and there's this whole dumb thing where they can't be together as like boyfriend and girlfriend. But he's saying, when I see you, I can't breathe, and it's all this like dumb dialogue that everyone makes fun of. But George Lucas, I'm not saying the dialogue is good, but I'm saying it is intentional because George Lucas knows the world script and he's purposefully associating that Antichrist character with not being able to breathe. Um, so then he lets him go and he's gasping for air. So I haven't seen this movie. I just saw the poster, but I saw that it's also DreamWorks, which is Steven Spielberg, who's another huge world scripter. It also comes out on March 22nd, which was 322, but 2013. But anyway, this looks like this movie is all about like a journey to the Split Mountain, and there's a bunch of other symbolism you could see too in this poster, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention. This is the fourth Thor movie, and I think this Thor logo is Mandela affected, where the T and the H are connected. And here's Thor, who's a Christ character, and he's got the plasma going on for the blue beam, and he's on top of the split mountain. So what you're seeing basically is the blue beam rising up out of the split mountain. There's also, of course, the Saturn symbolism in the background too, which I don't want to get overly into. So this is the newest Jurassic World movie, Rebirth. So this is like Resurrection, and on the island they go to, there's this big split mountain with the mist. And Tron. We have the characters making this M shape with their legs, and this is like the split mountain, and it's on top of the concentric circles, and you have the small dome. You also have the Star of Bethlehem rays coming out, and the blue beam shooting up through the concentric circle apex dome, and the union of male and female at the center, making the M split mountain. And the same thing here with the Tron Legacy, the male and female uniting at the center, making the M split mountain with the blue beam shooting up through the apex dome. Here we have Men in Black. So you have their legs making the split M mountain, and we also have like the twin pillars and the needle. And they're also saying, protecting the earth from the scum of the universe. And this mountain is likely what creates the dome around the earth, which is literally protecting the earth from the scum of the universe. So it's actually pretty amazing if you know the world script and what's going on. And in this Daredevil movie, we have male and female united at the center, making the M mountain at the pyramidal. They're also, they got the pyramidal M here. And I'm not really familiar with this Daredevil character, but his name is Matthew Murdock. So again, with the MM. So I'm sure there's a ton of world script symbolism. I think there's a new like Daredevil TV show or something, but I feel like I saw the movie like a little bit in the past, like when it was on TV. Like I saw a couple scenes, but I don't know a lot about it. I'm just bringing it up because clear world script symbolism here with a lot of stuff. There's the storm going on also, but also the name Matt Murdock. So in this movie, Furiosa, this is the newest Mad Max movie, the MM. And of course, you have all this. He's the Antichrist character, Dementus, and his name is Chris, which is like Christ. A lot of symbolism here too. I don't want to get overly into it. These posters are pretty over the top with the symbolism. But what I wanted to show you guys was there's a scene towards the beginning of the movie where Furiosa, as a kid, she's riding on this motorcycle with her mother, who's trying to protect her, and they head towards this split mountain. And here you can see it better. It's a giant split mountain, and they hide into the center of this split mountain. And then the mother is going to sacrifice herself so Furiosa can get back to paradise. So the mother is being like the Jesus character in this scene. And she's saying, ride to the high ground and hide yourself. If I don't find you in one day, go home. And the word home is symbolic of paradise, which I'll be talking about in the future. And I've talked about it in the past too. Definitely check out my keywords of the Mandela Effect video if you haven't, because the word home comes up a lot in the Mandela Effect. And I think it's God talking about us getting back to paradise, back to the Garden of Eden, back to our real home, away from this world, which is not our home. And she says, whatever you have to do, however long it takes, promise me you'll find your way home. And then she gives her the seed too. She says, plant this seed and protect the green place. So again, we have the North Pole home, the garden, being known as this green place, which is also like the Emerald City and like the green Northern Lights and all that. And she says, "The stars be with you." So Furiosa takes off on this motorcycle, but then she looks back. She's also kind of next to this dead North Pole tree here because we're in a world of the Antichrist rule. It's also got the red skies and all that. And she runs back because she doesn't want to have her mother be, sacrificed for her. But then she comes back, and this Dementis's gang, they have her basically crucified, but she's also on this giant X too for like the North Pole. And Dementis picks her up, and she's like, "Oh, she's your mother. Perfect." And when you see this word perfect, this also relates to Jesus, because God is perfect. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to, torture her to get information out of her to find out how they can get to paradise. They want to invade paradise. And who's torturing her? It's this guy with the giant, devil horns, and he also is the same character that rides on the giant kraken, um, like hang glider device that I've shown in the past, where it's like all these tentacles behind him. So he's basically the devil kraken. And then Dementis is like the Antichrist character, and they're saying, tell me where you came from, and we'll stop. All you have to do is just point, to paradise, basically, and I'll take you home. And this guy crying, he's interesting too because he's like the history man. And what happens with this world is a lot of people lose their memories, or memory is taken from the world, which is why we've been remembering how the world used to be. But most people will forget, how the world is now, and all of it. But this guy, you can't really see it here, but he has words tattooed over his whole body. And when they need to know something, he checks his body to figure out the tattoos so that he can remember what happened in the past. And it's like the movie Memento, if you've ever seen that, which is a Christopher Nolan movie where this guy keeps losing his memory. So he has to tattoo things on his body. And then he uses the tattoos to know what's going on after he loses his memory. And it's just something that comes up where there's going to be this mass, memory loss, if there isn't already, because it seems like a lot of people, basically have no memories anymore. But just saying, it's there's the whole end of the world is tied to memory for sure, and so is the Mandela effect, obviously. And then they zoom into Furiosa's left eye, the eye of destruction, as she's watching, this happen to her mother. And that takes us to Joe versus the volcano, which making pretty good time here. So I'll go through this pretty fast, but this movie is like really incredible. It also stars Tom Hanks, who's a major world scripter, and he's also hugely tied in with the Mandela effect. And Joe is, of course, the right pillar, and the volcano is the North Pole mountain. And this luggage that he buys is also symbolic of the North Pole continent, which I'll show you guys. So the movie starts out. It's a lot like Metropolis, if you're familiar with that, like the beast system, basically, and all the workers, slaves, and all that. So he gets to his job, and he's in the Black Mirror. So the first thing they show you in the movie is the Black Mirror, and then he steps in it. It's kind of like it's a comedy too. I've actually always liked this movie. It's not like one of my favorite movies, but I've just always liked it. It's a lot of fun, and I definitely recommend watching it if you haven't seen it. Although I'm going to go through, a lot of it here. So we got Tom Hanks, and then he's walking into this, horrible workplace, and they're playing this 16 Tons song, which I think is a Mandela effect too, but I forgot to research that one. But I'm pretty sure this song does have a Mandela effect in it, but just, food for thought for the future. So anyway, the lyrics of the song are, "Some people say a man is made out of mud," which is like Adam. And they're saying the system wants a mind that's weak and a back that's strong. So this is like what the Rockefellers did when they set up the education system. They didn't want thinkers; they wanted workers. And you can see how this whole building that he's walking into is like a giant mouth. And here are the two eyes. And I'll get you a closer shot of that. You load 16 tons, and what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. And he says, St. Peter, don't call him, because he can't go because he sold his soul to the company store. So this movie has a lot of like selling your soul type symbolism in it. And the place they work at also is the home of the rectal probe, which is funny and also appropriate. and he's doing like the Christ pose. He's also, asking to be saved basically by Jesus here. And this lightning bolt, this is symbolic of a number of things, which I'll be showing you guys. And here's the lightning bolt inside of the pyramid. So this is the pyramidal mountain with basically the blue beam lightning shooting up through it. But it's also representative, I think, of like the tree of life, where this is like when you see like that lightning bolt symbolism, it's like us going back and forth between the right and left pillars, but then getting up to the top. It's also why, Lucifer, crashed down to the earth like lightning, because he went in reverse, from being heavenly down to the ground essentially. And here you can see like one of the eyes is like a spiral portal, and the other eye is like a door. So both the portal and the door are the same symbolism. And they're saying that he owes his soul to the company store, and they show this one flower that this one woman just steps on. And like the lone flower is also symbolic of the North Pole, because this is where that lone flower blooms at the top, like the lotus. And like the lotuses are very symbolic of our spiritual evolution too, because their seeds are planted at the bottom of water, like at the bottom, like basically down in the abyss. But then the plant rises through the water and then blooms up at the top of the water. So that's also this same symbolism too. That's why the lotus flowers are in IPEC Goat 2, and that's also why they symbolize Mandela effects as well, which I've talked about in the past. I don't want to get overly into it. So then this portal door opens and they walk in. And Meg Ryan, she plays 3 different characters in this movie. And this first character, she's just part of this beast system, and she's always sick. And she's got the polka dot Vesica Pisces type dress. And the polka dots represent illness and viruses. And she also is using an inhaler because she can't breathe, which I've talked about a lot, of course. So then he also goes right for the coffee. He goes right for the black goo because he's part of the beast system, and he's, getting blinded by these, fluorescent lights above him. And then his boss is this Mr. Waturi. So Joe is starting to get an inkling that he wants to get out of this, beast system way of life. So he puts this lamp on his desk that has these images of paradise on it. And Meg Ryan walks over to him with like some paperwork, and she says, "What's with your shoe?" And he says, "I'm losing my soul." Like the soul is coming off of his shoe, but obviously he's talking about his, human soul. And then she says, "Yeah, because she is too." And then she sniffles because she's sick and can't breathe. And she has the polka dot dress here. So then Mr. Waturi comes, and he's like, "Hey, Joe, how you doing?" And then Joe says, "Well, I'm not feeling good." So he's like, "What else is new? You never feel good," which is basically how I feel living in this world. And then he's like, "Yep." So then he does the Christ pose, or the Antichrist pose, because he's the big W who's in charge of this, Antichrist beast, North Pole, you know, uh, temple that they're in. And they're going back and forth with this, nonsense talk. It's kind of like the TPS reports in Office Space, if you've seen that. And he's got the paradise. This is almost like the Crystal Cave Mountain here with the steps up, and then you got like the Paradise Island here with the woman, and it even kind of looks like the blue beam the way this is shining on the lamp. So then his boss, Frank Waturi, says, "You think I feel good? Nobody feels good. I feel rotten. So what? I don't let it bother me. I don't let it interfere with my job. Like what's more important than doing this, ridiculously mundane and pointless job, like who cares if you're, sick all the time?" And he's like, "You're like a child, and like we're supposed to return to heaven as children." And he's like, "And what's with this lamp for? Is there not enough light in here for you? And for us, there shouldn't be enough light around. We should be wanting more and more light." So he's like, "I thought this light would," and he's like, "Just get rid of the light." And like this Waturi guy, he can't stand his lamp. So he's like, "You got to get yourself into this flexible frame," and he makes like this, box shape. You got to, put yourself into this box prison and take that light off your desk. So he's like, "Okay, I will." And he's like, "Do it right now." So he can't, like this guy like can't stand the lamp to the point where he needs him to get rid of it as soon as possible. So he turns the lamp off and he puts it on the ground. And he's like, "Okay, good." So he goes to his doctor's appointment, and the doctor tells him that he has like this brain cloud. And he's like, "What's a brain cloud?" So he's like, "There's a black fog of tissue running right down the center of your brain. It's very rare. So this is about the black mirror in between the two halves of us, our twins." And he's like, "It's very destructive." He tells him he has 6 months to live. So then Tom Hanks goes back to his job and he figures, since he only has 6 months to live, he might as well quit the job. And he says, life's a joke, this situation, this room. So then the boss is like, Joe, maybe you should just go. And interesting too, how they have like this Wi-Fi symbolism here. And he's like, you look terrible, Mr. Wateri. Not that anybody could look good under these zombie lights. I can feel them sucking the juice out of my eyeballs, so this is like how I think a lot of us feel where we have our energy being sucked out of us all the time. Suck, 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 suck. And he says, the coffee stinks. It's like arsenic. He's basically saying, the black goo is like deadly poison, and the lights give him a headache. The fake lights, the imposter lights, and if they don't give you a headache, you must be dead, or you must be, spiritually dead. So the boss is like, you better get out of here. You're telling too much truth. So he says, I've been too afraid to live my life, so I sold it to you for $300 a week. So he's like, I'm going to leave you here, Mr. Wahoo Waturi. So here's like that WW symbolism, because they could have called him anything. But the WW is like, Walter White, Willy Wonka. It's like the reverse of the MM. It's the Antichrist, version of Mount Meru, the upside down. And then he says, what could be worse than having to stay here? And then Dee Dee, it's probably like the door, but he's like, or she's like, yeah. And then he's like, how about we have dinner? And she goes, okay. And she's like, wow, what a change. So she's noticed that he's, changed. He's become spiritually awake, and she's happy about it. And then they go to this place, for, I don't know if it's like a bar or a restaurant, and they're dancing outside of it. And also they have this sign here for fire in paradise, because where he's about to be going is this paradise island. And they also have the lone rose flower here too, which is all this North Pole, evolution of man symbolism. And they're dancing outside, and dancing is another huge piece of the world script. And just 1 second here. All right. Let me check in with the chat here. I haven't really been keeping up with you guys. Oh, hey. Sorry, guys. I missed a lot. Hey, CJC. Good to see you. Gift of Water. Thanks. Good to see you. Yep. I hope all of our antenna are spiritually connected for sure. Crunchy B. Good to see you. Thank you, KYO. Yeah, the song that never ends. That's actually a Mandela effect from the Lamb Chop show. It was always the song that never ends, but now it's the song that doesn't end. And that's also a nod, I think, to the song of eternal life, the blue beam. Hey, Cage Fighter, what's up? Good to see you. Hey, Andrew. Yep, when you see it clearly. It's amazing, like what we can see now. It's like watching all these things for the first time. Hey, Dust. Yeah, Ronin 47 with Keanu Reeves. Yeah, I've seen that. Yep, that's definitely a world script movie for sure. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the Andrew's asking, what do the elites think of people knowing all this stuff now? I think they knew it was like an inevitability. I think it's probably just another sign for them that the world's about to end, because how could this keep going with more and more of the public waking up? Something's got to give sooner or later. And I think it has to happen while Trump is in the spotlight. Yeah, I think they do want us to know. Yeah, I agree. Because it's two things will happen at the end of the world. Christ will have his people, but then the Antichrist Kraken will also get his people. So both God and the devil, I think, want this to happen. It's like it's a necessary, thing. And then the earth will be, terraformed and changed and all that. Yeah. Yeah, it's just going to be a small group. Yeah, I don't really expect this channel to get too big, frankly. It would be like weird if I woke up one day and there was like 1 million subs or something. Like I feel like most of the people wouldn't know what we're even talking about, you know? Like, I don't even know if they would be, like, mad about it. I feel like they wouldn't even get it, you know? But, I mean, it'd be great, but if a lot of people did. I just don't feel like it's gonna work out that way. Yeah, people just think, Andrew's saying that all he gets from most people is, "How does this affect their life?" Yeah, I mean, if you're not interested in spiritually awakening and, you know, being with Jesus, then, it doesn't affect your life, you know, you just wanna keep going to, you know, sports events and drinking beer and eating food and, you know, just I mean, you know, just doing normal people, you know, things. I mean, obviously, this doesn't matter. Yeah, it's a lonely journey, but it has to be a lonely journey, and actually, there's a line in Joe, versus the volcano that talks about that. It's pretty interesting. I'll be, I'll be, showing you guys that soon. Yeah, Matthew, you can, email me. There's an email, if you look at the YouTube page under the, contact section. Yep. Yeah, the lightning on the Kabbalah tree, yep. Yeah, all these things are based in this truth. Hey, Dean, good to see you. Hey, sure thing, CJC. I definitely recommend, watching Joe versus the volcano. It's a good one. But like I said, I'm gonna, you know, spoil the whole thing. Yeah, 144,000 subs. That'd be cool. Yeah, you have to want the information. That's actually a big, Mandela effect, like, in the movie, A Few Good Men, and if you think about it, it's called A Few Good Men, and women, of course. Men is men and women. But, I think God is pointing out how there's only gonna be a few of them, and then the line that got changed is when Jack Nicholson said, "You want the truth, you want the truth, you can't handle the truth." But now he just says, "You can't handle the truth." So I think what God is saying is if you don't want the truth, then you can't handle it. And I've talked about that too in my spiritual messages video. Yep, it's a scripted fake reality. That's for sure. Yeah, I think that the little season thing, it's like uh, a cyclical reset, you know, between Christ and Antichrist rule, and that doesn't mean that things are the exact same every time. You know, I think that like um, the spiritual energy keeps going down and down with every reset, but then we're about to enter the next Christ rule of the world where it's at like maximum energy. So I think it's going to be even more amazing than the millennial reign, frankly. There should be an email there. It's just C3PO's golden calf at gmail.com with no dashes or anything. All right. So getting back to Joe versus the volcano. So this character basically represents God, and he's got the duck cane. And ducks, a lot of animals are representative of things symbolically, of course. And I think ducks represent like an evolved human because ducks can swim, walk, and fly. You know, so they could basically do everything on Earth. You know, and the whole goal of us spiritually evolving is for us to fly. So a duck is a good thing, I would say. So he says, you know, can I come in? So he has to let God into his house, which is hopefully what we're all doing lately. And he walks in and he's like, man, this is dismal and shabby. He's even got like an outline of that uh, lightning bolt on the wall here. And the drapes are also like hexagons too, which is kind of like the dome. And he says, you know, his name is Samuel Harvey Graynamore. And Samuel, I think, means like something like the voice of God or like someone who's like God. And then gray, this is like the central pillar because it's the mixture of black and white. And I'm sure there's more in there uh, as well. And then he says, you know, he's Joe. He's like, oh, he knows because God knows all of us, of course. And he says he's trying to see the hero in there. And he says, you know, he wants to hire Joe to jump into a volcano. There's an island in the South Pacific called Waponi Wu. So again, here we have the WW. at the North Pole Mountain. This would be the Antichrist version of the North Pole. And he says it means little island with a big volcano, and they call it the Big Woo. And I'm sure there's a lot to that too. It could be like the Double O portal and all that. Their one fear is that big volcano. They believe that an angry fire god in the volcano. Let me just take a quick break here for 1 second. Sorry, I try to like blow my nose and stuff. All right. So anyway, uh, so the volcano will sink the island unless once every 100 years he is appeased. And he says it's been 99 years, 11 months, and 11 days. So here we have, of course, if you make these, single digits, it's a very interesting number to be telling people. This movie came out, I think, in like the 80s, right? Since the fire god got his propers and the Waponis are scared, a man's got to jump into the volcano. And he also says there's a mineral on that island, and he doesn't know anywhere else in the world to get it where you can find more, or he doesn't know where you can find more than a gram of this stuff anywhere else. And he calls it boobaroo, which I'm not exactly sure what he's getting at here. It's kind of like the word bureau. I'm not totally sure what that because they could have called it anything. So I'm not really sure why he's saying that. But it is said, and this is something that Jay Dreamers talks about a lot too, where at the North Pole there are minerals and things that you can't get anywhere else. So that I think that's what they're referring to. But he's also saying he needs to make his superconductors, and he needs that mineral. So the superconductors, I think this is also like the blue beam people, the plasma, and all that. Christ's people. He's tried to get the mineral rights, but he doesn't have anything that they want except that they need a hero. So the volcanic North Pole island needs a hero. And all I know, oh, and he's saying that in Joe's past, he actually was heroic. He was a firefighter who went into burning buildings and rescued people. So he's saying, when you're making those kinds of calls, you're up in the high country. So he's saying, being at the top of the mountain, being spiritually elevated, and he gives him all these cards. So he's like, before you go, you could have all these, luxuries and all these things, and then they'll come out to meet you, and it'll be like a total red carpet situation. You'll be like a national hero. You'll be like Charles Lindbergh in the sweetest little paradise you ever saw. So if you understand what I'm getting at here with this Charles Lindbergh connection, because Charles Lindbergh is a big Mandela effect because his baby was always known to have been kidnapped and never found, but now that baby was found. So I think that's a huge Mandela effect, and I've talked about this too. Check out my video called "The Power of Names." Um, but Charles Lindbergh, Charles means the free man, and then Lindbergh means tree mountain. So this is again like the Shawshank Redemption, and it's like the free man at the tree mountain now has his child being found. So it's like the hero, excuse me, like Jesus's children are being found, spiritually dead, but then he'll resurrect them. So and then in the sweetest little paradise, so I mean it's a amazing symbolism, and it also it always makes me think like who exactly is writing these scripts. And then you jump into the volcano, and that's what I say. What do you say? He's like a crazy guy. And what's funny too is Joe. He's always like so apathetic to everything. He's like, all right, I'll do it, whatever. So he goes to these high-end stores and he buys a bunch of things and he buys like this little golf course. This is going to later represent, the green at the North Pole Mountain, which I'll show you. So he's like, I'll take the little golf course, and he buys a bunch of things. He buys a radio, so this is his communications that he needs with God. He also gets two lanterns, so this is going to be the lanterns for him and Meg Ryan. And he also gets this red and white dome, this umbrella. And when you see an umbrella, it represents the dome. It also has like the shaft going up in the middle, which is like the blue beam into the center of the dome. And it also contracts too, like a needle does. So I'll take that too. And then he goes to get luggage. So this guy who's the luggage salesman, he's like, you travel the world, you're away from home, you're on a real journey, and then you'll be staying on this island. It's very exciting. I have just the thing. And they start playing this choir music, it says here, and they show you this North Pole Star of Bethlehem symbol on the ground. And he opens this, door portal to his new luggage. And he says, this is our premier steamer trunk, all handmade, his trunk of choice. So he says, I'll take four of them because these pieces of luggage are going to represent the four North Pole continents. And then the guy says, may you live to be 1,000 years old. So this, I think, is a reference to like the millennial reign of Christ. And then he has this chauffeur who's also played by Ozzy. That's Ozzy Davis. So you have the Oz reference. And Tom Hanks wants to go to the plaza to stay. He wants to stay at the best hotel. So then Ozzy's like, well, I wouldn't stay there. I would stay at the Pierre. So he's like, well, then off to the Pierre. But then what Pierre means, you may have noticed this. So Pierre is the same as the name Peter, but what Peter means is rock or stone. So he's saying off to the North Pole, Black Rock, off to the Stone Mountain. So he invites Ozzy to do I have his name? Maybe he invites Ozzy to dinner, but he says he can't make dinner. He has to go home to his family. So he's like, haven't you got anybody? So Tom Hanks is like, no, but, and this is what I was talking about before when someone talked about this in the comments. He says, there are certain times in your life when I guess you're not supposed to have anyone, certain doors you got to go through alone. So even if you're married or something, you're other people aren't going to help you with your connection to God. You got to go through that door portal in your own head on your own to communicate with God. And then Ozzy's like, you're going to be all right, because he just said the right thing. And then he meets his next guide, who's the second character that Meg Ryan plays. And then this character, she's basically two sisters, and he'll meet the other sister later, which is the one he ends up with. But she's like, and they're basically twins. I don't know if they say that they're twins, but they say that they're sisters, but they're both also played by Meg Ryan, so they're effectively twins. So she's the red and black, left pillar, Antichrist version, and then he meets later the yellow and blue and white, Christ right pillar version. And then, when they're having dinner, she orders the Dungeness crabs, and the crab is symbolic of the Kraken as well, because it has the legs that come out like a spider, like the tentacles. So whenever you see like a giant crab in something, it's representative of the Kraken. And like I said, she's got the red and black going on. And she says they look like little monsters, but they're good little monsters, so she likes it. So they don't get along really. And then he gets handed off to his next guide, who is this version of Meg Ryan, who's the yellow, blue, and white, like the Columbia colors. And they're on a boat, and she's saying, we're going to the island of, WW. And they're aboard the boat called the Tweedledee. So again, with that twin symbolism, like Tweedledee and Tweedledum from Alice in Wonderland, and also bringing up Alice in Wonderland into this story. So you'll notice that a lot of World Script stories reference Alice in Wonderland or the Wizard of Oz. They're like the two biggest things that just come up all the time. And also what you might notice is these sunflowers are representative of the eclipse. So whenever you see sunflowers, that's eclipse symbolism. Like for instance, in the Wizard of Oz movie, what's it called? The newer one with James Franco. I've talked about it a little bit. The Oz the Great and Powerful. And like when he gets to Oz, they're walking through like a field of sunflowers. This is because the worlds are merging. It's the eclipse symbolism. And then they also have like a bunch of domes and all kinds of stuff in that movie. So he's like the Tweedledee, and she goes, it's the name of the boat. her father is God basically. That God character with the duck cane, he's the father of both these Meg Ryan characters. So he said he'd give her the boat if he took her, or if she took him, and he's got two of them. This is the Tweedledee, and there's also a Tweedledum. So I don't want to get overly into it, but I feel like the D and the dumb, it's like literally like the word dumb. So he's not on the Tweedledum, basically. He's on the Tweedledee, and D is often symbolic of a door. So the Waponis are known throughout Polynesia as having a peculiar love of orange soda. So here, the orange, you have the 33 symbolism because the word orange, I think, reduces to 33. And they have no sense of direction. And this is something I'll be talking about in the future, where like all our compasses point to the North Pole, but when you're at the North Pole, the compass just spins around or it doesn't work because you're at the destination. So these people at WW at the North Pole Mountain, they have no sense of direction because they're already at the North Pole. They're at the the main, final destination. So he's like, they like orange soda. So they're talking on the boat, and she says, "My father says that almost the whole world is asleep. Everyone you know, everybody you see, everybody you talk to. He says that only a few people are awake, and they live in a state of constant total amazement." So this is like what we were just talking about in the chat. It's just a few people, really, maybe the 144,000. And I've actually been seeing 144 like constantly lately. I don't know about you guys. Has anyone in the chat, been seeing that? Because I've there's a bunch of numbers that I see fairly often, like the 911 number, or 119 and stuff like that. But like 144 has been like big time lately. But anyway, here's the storm coming, and Meg Ryan on the ship, and the storm, and the mist, and the thunder's coming, and here we have the plasma storm, and it makes the same lightning bolt shape onto the boat and destroys the vessel. And here we have the plasma storm too, and like these are like this obviously isn't real lightning; it's basically drawn onto the screen. So this even looks like what they did in the Matrix, where it kind of looks like a mountain with the blue beam shooting out of the top, and then there's like a T or a cross on the mountain. So the boat goes down, and they both get saved by the luggage. So they're basically on the North Pole Island here, symbolically, and Meg Ryan is unconscious. And this is interesting too, because they showed the sun with this other dot next to it, and these are like the lens flares over here. So I see a lot of people who talk about the flat, shape of the Earth, point things out like this, where I think the sun is like similar to like a magnifying glass, like when you use a magnifying glass to like burn a piece of paper or something. Like I think that the real sun isn't the sun. The real sun is like a point of focus, and then the real sun is either behind the sun or it's somehow being projected into that spot. And we all kind of see our own sun depending on where we are. But this almost like alludes to that, how this isn't the real sun. It's just kind of weird. Like, why would they show this? So he's dancing again on the North Pole, and coming to my heart and all that. And here we see the green top North Pole Island, and the reason that it's the North Pole, it's four trunks. So you have the four continents with the four rivers. And then the green top. So this is like the Emerald City and all that. And at night, he's keeping her alive under this small dome, and these are actually images of fish on the dome here. But it kind of even looks like continents. Like they're saying the Earth is the dome. Something like that, floating away, and he's keeping her alive. So he's keeping the blue beam alive at the North Pole under the small dome. And then we see the giant moon rise, and it looks like a dome again. And he's kind of like, dying because they've been on the ocean for so long, and he's giving all his water to Meg Ryan. And then the moon rises, and he starts doing the Christ pose, or the Squatterman pose, like he's holding up the moon, which is also symbolic of the apex dome. And now they show it too here, like it's the dome from above, like in the apex dome. Because I think the sun and the moon are ultimately projections from that apex dome area in some way as well. And he starts praying to God, which you don't often see in movies, frankly. But he says, "Dear God, whose name I do not know, thank you for my life. I forgot how big, basically the world is. Thank you." And it's interesting too, because being thankful is huge. If you're not like a thankful person, I highly suggest trying to even like just train yourself to be more thankful, even for just like little things or even for negative things. Because when negative things happen to us, they help build us as a person. So um, I just know that you'll be rewarded spiritually the more thankful you are, and of course the more humble you are. So he's saying, thank you for my life to God. And then after he's given this thankful prayer to God, they're seen at the North Pole by the Waponi people, and he's got the big orange soda and all that. And he's even got like the Squatterman on his face, and also like the third eye symbolism and all that with the 33 and the orange and all that. And here's the split mountain at the North Pole, and it's the giant volcano. And here's the leader of the Waponi. He says, are you Joe? And they're welcomed by all the people because he's going to be their hero. And they're doing the handhold. And he asks him what this like puppet thing is, and he says it's his soul. So he says, I hope you don't lose it. So he's like, so do I. So here's the island. So remember the shot that I showed you before of the split mountain? It looked like a split mountain, but now from this angle, it doesn't look like a split mountain. So that's why I was saying earlier, sometimes it depends on your angle of looking at the mountain as to what you see. And that's also true of the blue beam and the Squatterman and all that. It depends on where you are in the world and what angle you're at. It depends, and that will dictate what shape you see. So they're going through this ceremony before he jumps into the volcano, and it's funny. Tom Hanks is like getting beaten with these fish and all this ridiculous stuff, but Meg Ryan, she's like she's getting like a spa treatment, and it's all like great, but Tom Hanks has to go through all this crap. And one of the things he has to go through is he so they don't show them sticking the octopus on his face. They just cut to him with the octopus on his face, and he pulls it off. So this is like that face hugger alien symbolism, and of course the Kraken symbolism. So he's basically pulling the face hugger Kraken off of his face. He's getting rid of this, Kraken entity, and that's also symbolic of getting rid of the beast system. And then he's going to be, becoming a Phoenix hero at the North Pole. And he's like, all right, that's it. He's had enough of all this stuff. And then they show the duck again because he's becoming like a duck. Symbolically, he's going to be able to fly. So then night falls, but it's also the eclipse symbolism where the sun goes behind the split mountain. And then he's wearing a black and white tuxedo. So here's the black and white central pillar symbolism, also with the mist. And they're all cheering for him. And here they are sitting the twin pillars kind of before the ceremony. And they also have these twin gongs or bells, and people go flying into them. But this is like the bell ringing, like the bell tower, the bell symbolism that always comes up. So he says, the chief says, we have no hero of our own. And then they do this whole dance where they're saying, Kamala, and the volcano says Kamala a lot. So like, if you knew the world script, you would have known that Kamala wasn't going to be elected because Trump had to come back into power. But her name is definitely significant because her name also means lotus, like I was talking about before with the lotus flower. But she's like, the black lotus and all that. And they also reference this Kamala name, in reference to this whole North Pole volcano and all that. So he's like, take me to the volcano. They all start cheering. And then they go up this lightning bolt path to the top of the volcano. And then when he's about to do it, Meg Ryan is, saying stop, and she declares that she's fallen in love with him. And he's like, you love me? And she's like, you can't just die and leave me here on this stinking earth without you. So he's like, well, I got to do it. So so no matter what happens, he has to do his duty, his Christ-like duty of sacrifice. So he goes up the stairs, and then she chases after him, and he's like, get back down. And she says, marry me. So he's like, what? So she's like, marry me, and then you could jump in the volcano. So they have the chief marry them, and it's like this really quick thing. So they get married. So again, we have the marriage symbolism, the union of the male and female at the North Pole Mountain. And he's saying, well, and she's saying, so don't jump in. But he's saying, I got to be brave. I have to jump in. So they both go up to the top, and here they're under the dome, but they're also at the Squatterman symbol. This statue is the Squatterman. And I'll show you guys more of this in the future too. So he says, so she says, I'm jumping in with you. And he doesn't want her to. And they both eventually decide to jump in. So she says, we'll take this leap and we'll see. and she's talking about the leap of faith. So that's another huge part of the world script, is that in order to spiritually evolve and get to the camp of the saints, you have to take a leap of faith. So, he's saying, I was miserable for so long, years of my life wasted, and it was a long time coming to meet you, a long time on a crooked road. So the crooked road is like that lightning bolt path up the tree of life to meet this woman who represents, not just his, Eve, but also the feminine spiritual energy of the Columbia blue beam, the Christ blue beam, the yellow, blue and white blue beam. And so they hug, they're together, and they're going to jump in together. And he says, so what are we hoping for? And she says, a miracle. So he says, give me your hand. So they do the M handhold. So they're doing the M handhold under the small dome of the Squatterman at the North Pole Mountain. And they take the leap of faith. And then when they jump into the volcano, they get shot right back up, like the phoenix. So they go down into the abyss and then get shot back up out of the abyss. And they're doing the M handhold the whole time, just like how Neo and Trinity were doing the M handhold the whole time with their inside their ship on the way to the machine mainframe source. And they get shot up out of the split mountain like a NASA rocket, basically. And they get shot out and they go flying into the water, which is what a lot of people think NASA rockets do. And the volcano erupts, then the whole island comes down, and then they're in the water and they're laughing that they got saved. And he's like, we just jumped in and it blew us out. I'd say that's a miracle. There goes the WW. So this is another thing that's theorized, is when the blue beam goes up, it's very possible that the mountain goes away or is at least transformed in some way. So he's like, that's all great and all, but we're going to drown, which is also not being able to breathe and going down into the abyss. But she's the positive, energy. So she's like, no, we're not. And then after she says that, his luggage pops up out of the water. So here again, they're being saved at another symbol for the North Pole Mountain. So here comes the 4 continents up out of the water, which is also something that might happen, frankly, where I've said this before too, where at the North Pole, maybe there actually isn't anything there right now, or maybe it's just like the top of the mountain, sticking up out of the water, and then like the 4 continents that used to be there, maybe they're under the water. And then when the water recedes after the plasma apocalypse or Armageddon, then all of a sudden the 4 continents will become visible again, which is what's happening here at the end of Joe versus the volcano. And then the mountain goes down into the water, and they're on the luggage North Pole Mountain, and she has her lantern lit. She's saying, isn't it romantic? Who gets a honeymoon like this? And also in the word honeymoon, you have the honey and the moon. I don't want to get too off topic, but the moon would be like the apex dome, and then like the land of milk and honey, like we were talking about, like in the boys, they were saying that. So here you could see they have the light. This is like the eternal light, or their lantern, in the middle of the X. So like this is like the 4 rivers and the 4 continents. Then you have the new, Adam and Eve in paradise on the North Pole Mountain, or lands. And then he tells her, about the brain cloud thing, and she's like, a brain cloud. And he says Dr. Ellison told him that. So again, we have the EL in the name of the doctor. So the doctor was also symbolic of God. And she's like, that's my father's doctor. And her father is that God character. So she's like, that's my father's doctor. He could just have that Dr. Ellison say whatever he wants. So he's like, I don't have a brain cloud. It was all just like a big setup. So then he starts not being able to breathe. And he's saying his, throat's closing up. But then she's, the positive energy. So she's like, no, everything's great. This all worked out for the best. We met each other, your whole life's ahead of you now. And then he's like, oh yeah, you're right. Everything actually is awesome. So, they're together, they kiss right over the lantern, and then they, float off on the, they're on, they're basically in paradise. And she's like, I wonder where we'll end up. And then he says, away from the things of man. So it's pretty blatant and pretty awesome, frankly. So here's the, going back to that Squatterman symbol, and here's just a quick shot of Jay. If you want to definitely check out his video on the Squatterman, this is where I learned it. He also talks about it in other videos as well. And I also recommend checking out this video of mine if you haven't seen it. It's with Obi-Wan on the cover, and it's all about the blue beam. And I'll just show you quickly normally when they show us the blue beam in these stories, it's just like a blue shaft of light going from the ground to the sky. So this is the sword and the stone, where the sword appears in the blue beam, and this is, on top of that pyramidal steps, like we just saw with what was it in Rogue One there. And then you have the sword and the stone. This is the blue beam, and of course the anvil is the Mandela effect. The same thing with in Superman. You have the blue beam shooting up. It's just like a shaft of light, and then the dome is going away because of it. So the blue beam gets rid of the dome from the center of the Earth in the concentric circles. Here in the second Sonic the Hedgehog movie, Sonic represents Jesus and the CV spiked balls and the blue beam, because they're all basically the same entity. And the blue beam from one of his quills shoots up through this dome. And it's also like the bottom of the Squatterman, where you have like, the two legs and like the male part, which isn't really that. It just looks like that. And then if you look at it from this angle, this is like, the Earth with the blue beam shooting up out of the top through the small dome over the North Pole. And it's just like in Avengers, you have the blue beam shooting up off the top of the Stark Tower here. And I think this is Mandela affected too, with the A coming down and the T not being connected. I think this logo here got Mandela affected in the Avengers movies. And then you have the Kraken coming down from that portal. And to keep in mind all these smoke tentacles. So you have the Christ blue beam going up and the Antichrist Kraken tentacles coming down. And the same thing in the Matrix. You have the blue beam shooting up in the dome, the small dome over Zion, and then the Kraken tentacles coming down. So the Christ blue beam going up and the Antichrist Kraken coming down. And this is the end of the third Matrix movie, which is depicting the end of the world. And this is Dark City. You have the shaft of blue light coming up off of the North Pole Central Mountain here, where they're having the fight between Christ and Antichrist. Here's the blue beam shooting up out of the Black Pyramid in Las Vegas, right next to the Excalibur Casino. And the Excalibur, like in Sword of the Stone, is the blue beam. And this is in the movie Army of the Dead, where you have what they're showing Las Vegas is basically the camp of the saints at the North Pole with the blue beam shooting up, and then the zombie army is invading it from the outside. And then in this anime Bleach, you have the blue beam shooting up off of the Dark Tower, and it's shooting up into the apex dome here. And then this character who's going up into the blue beam, his name is like almost like Yode Vave. It's how do they pronounce it? It's like Yuha Baka or something like that. And the maker of Bleach, Tide Kubo, he actually originally wanted this character to be named YH VH, but the editors or the publishers wouldn't allow it, so they named him like YWACH, something like that. But anyway, it's all the same symbolism, of course, and he looks like Jesus. And it's inverted too, because he's the villain. And here, the blue beam is shooting up through the apex dome, and it causes the plasma apocalypse, basically, with the smoke coming down. And then in One Piece, this is actually the biggest anime ever. They have the blue beam shooting up into the sky, and this is how the characters ride their vessel up into it to get to the gates of heaven. Literally, it says like the heavenly gates. And they go up to the Sky Island, and their ship is flying. And then this is like, the adventurous attitude that I think God wants us to have. You would think it'd be scary to be flying a boat up this blue beam up into the sky, but the main character, he's excited. He can't wait to know what's up there. And After Earth, this is a M. Night Shyamalan movie where M. Night Shyamalan is, of course, another big world script director and writer. If he's writing these movies, I don't know if these people are writing these movies. I don't think they are, frankly. But the main character, he conquers the Kraken at the Crystal Cave in the mountain, and then he shoots the blue beam communications device up from the mountain into the apex dome in the sky. And the same thing happens in the Tron movies, which I talked about. You got the blue beam shooting up, and same thing in Cocoon. You got the blue beam, and they're flying up in their boat, in their vessel, up into the concentric circles in the apex dome. And getting back to so what I wanted to show you guys there was, usually when we're shown the blue beam in these movies and stories, it's just like a shaft of light, but it could also be like this Squatterman symbol. So here, if you're interested in plasma and all that, you feel free to research it. But it's because these are the different states and formations that plasma makes. So this is plasma essentially. It's like lightning. It's in like one of these plasma balls. You've probably have seen this. It's attracted to your hand if you touch it, and lightning is also plasma. Like here in Tesla's lab and all that. So yeah, lightning is plasma. So here's a couple shots from Jay's Squatterman video. So he made this awesome depiction of what's going on here with the plasma and the magnetism, and how it's shooting up from this North Pole Mountain into the apex dome area, but it's also creating a protective dome layer over the North Pole area, and it relates to these petroglyphs that are from thousands of years ago and from all over the world. So this is showing like a Squatterman plasma blue beam symbol going up to the spiraling portal at the apex dome. And the same thing with this old Sumerian tablet. They have these twins on either side, and this plasma formation going up through the center, up into this apex dome phoenix looking symbol here. And same thing with these. So I definitely check out Jay's Squatterman videos. What I'm saying here, but I think he also got his research from this scientist's research, Anthony Peratt. So this guy was conducting experiments with plasma physics, and he noticed the connection between the shape that the plasma was taking and these different petroglyphs that are found all around the world. And there's also this channel on Instagram called Electric Gnosis that I would recommend checking out. I'm not on Instagram. I just did like a Google search for these images, but this person came up, so definitely check him out, follow him. So I don't want to get overly into it because we're already almost at 2 hours, but you can check this out on your own, how this plasma can take the shape of this Squatterman symbol. This is also where like the Baphomet symbol comes from, I believe, because you have like the male symbol down here between the legs, if this is like the Squatterman, but then these O portals, this is also similar possibly to like the double O portal thing, but it also looks like breasts for like the Baphomet, or like the transgender thing, also like the union of male and female at the center. And what we see with all the trans stuff that's been happening in our world is like an inverted kind of dark representation of the beautiful blue beam amazingness that looks like that. And you could also check out this website, EIX Del MON, where he talks about the Peratt instabilities, and basically it's just a rundown of this guy's experiments and what he found. So like these are different shapes that the plasma can take, and notice how notice how this looks like a spine kind of, because that's going to come into play here soon. And these relate to all different like petroglyphs that are found all around the world. So here they're showing you like this is in Arizona, this is in Armenia, this is in Guyana, Spain, Venezuela, UAE, the Alps. So all around the world, people saw this symbol, and they saw it from different angles too. So it's constantly like moving and changing shapes. So what I'm saying is, like many things can represent the North Pole Mountain, also many shapes can represent this blue beam as well. And even like this trident type shape, and this like man leading up to the all-seeing eye shape, and there's even like a many-headed like hydra type shape. I think maybe in this slide here. So there's a lot to look at. Obviously, I could spend the whole video talking about this, and Jay has a great video or two on this as well, or many videos. But also like this many-headed serpent type of symbol is something that could happen too with the plasma as well. So, here is a better shot. So it's just something to keep in mind. And this is also like the North Pole Island here as well. So basically, these people who did these rock carvings in the past, they were making these images so that people would remember in the future of the things that were happening at that time. And we really needed them to do this, because without this, this connection might not have ever been made, and we wouldn't be able to remember the things that we're supposed to remember about the coming future after the world reset, or during and after the next world reset. And this is also something that's done in the TV show From, which I'm going to try to get to here, where one of the characters, he's been around the longest, and when he was a kid, he was trapped in this town that everyone is now trapped in, and he made all these drawings of things that happened to him or around him at that time, and then they're using those drawings of the things that he made to figure out what's happening in the present and the future, because it's all this resetting, events, series of events. And totem poles, this is where they come from as well. And this is why in The Shining, which I showed in a previous video, they have this like blue beam mural right above the fireplace. So you have these, they look like, totem poles, but they also look like birds and plasma and all that. But this is blue beam representation. All right, so Attack on Titan. This is one of the biggest animes that's come out in the last decade. And this logo here is definitely Mandela affected. The A's were normal A's, not open deltas, and the T's weren't connected like this. And I think there's also a little bit other changing going on here too, like the C just looks weird and stuff like that. But definitely the A's and the T's have changed. And this Titan is another big symbol of the Mandela effect, or a keyword. So like let's see. Well, there's a lot with the Titanic, for instance, but also the logo for like Clash of the Titans, I think it's called. That's been changed, and so there's a lot of things with Titan. I would actually look at the logo for the football team, the Tennessee Titans. That's one to keep an eye on. Frankly, I checked it sort of recently, and it looked normal to me, but it's definitely something to keep your eye on. There's also the movie Titan AE, which shows a blue beam right on the cover, which I've shown before, and that's like Titan after Earth. And here's another big poster for Attack on Titan, which I also think is Mandela affected. I don't think these T's had like these bottom parts that split, that like kind of shoot off to the right. I don't remember that either. So at the end of Attack on Titan, this main character Aaron, he needs to come into physical contact with this other character named Zeke, and when those two characters come into contact, they basically trigger the plasma apocalypse, or the Armageddon, end of the world. So he's running to try to just come into contact with Zeke, who's at the other end of this town. And here's Zeke. He's reaching out for him. He's like, "Yeah, come on." So the name Aaron, he's the main character. It basically means like a saint or a holy person. And then the name Zeke is like Ezekiel, which means God strengthens. And then here's the explanation of why they need to come into contact if you're interested. So as Aaron's running, there's this girl over here with a sniper rifle, like a really powerful one. And it's a little graphic and it's cartoon and all, but she basically shoots his head off. And this is symbolic of becoming enlightened. Like when you see a character's like head go flying off, it's almost always because they're becoming enlightened. Like that happens in the movie Begonia, if you're familiar. So his head gets shot off and it literally spirals up into the air. So here we have the main character of the story looking like he's being killed, and he basically is being killed, but it's also symbolic of him becoming enlightened. And then Zeke, catches his head, and this is also them making contact with each other. And then time basically freezes. And they show this eye, and I think it might be a left eye, but it's definitely symbolic of the third eye and the apex dome and all that. And then we get kind of transported into another world. So they're going through this eye portal, and this is an image of his father, who's in like agony, and he gets flipped around, kind of like in Stranger Things, how they show the upside down. So we're entering like the inverted world, or leaving the inverted world. Then they show this phoenix, symbolism. And then they show this key symbolism, and both the phoenix and the key are symbolic of the blue beam. And then they show the back of this girl who we've never met before, and she's in this shaft of light, and she represents basically God or Jesus and the blue beam as well. And then Aaron and Zeke are transported to this other place where there's this giant blue beam plasma tree, and it's called the Paths tree. And they're saying, and Zeke says, this is the coordinate where all paths converge. So this is where they're at the North Pole. They're at the center of the world, the coordinate where everything converges. This is, Middle Earth in the Lord of the Rings. And he says, and Aaron says, "How long have you been here?" And he says, "I'm not sure. Everything happens in an instant here." So they're beyond space and time again. So this is like Back to the Future and these other stories where in order to become, fully enlightened, and to get with, to be at the camp of the saints at the North Pole and all that, we have to conquer space and time, which is what we do through this portal. So here they're saying information available for public disclosure, the coordinate, the place where all paths intersect, time is both instant and infinite. And this is what heaven would feel like. So they're at this, although it isn't heavenly in this depiction right now, but so this character, her name is Ymir, Ymir, and she's basically the root or the being who brought all this into existence, this blue beam tree. And you can look up what Ymir means. Um, it's basically from Norse mythology, like the creator god, essentially. So we get introduced to her past and how she came to be, and she was just like this, sweet girl living in like a town, and she's getting water for people. She's like the water bearer, but then that town gets in, or that village gets invaded by these horned, apex dome antichrist looking, this horde, this these barbarians or whatever, Vikings or whatever, and they burn the whole place down and take people as slaves. And this is Ymir being taken as a slave, and they're saying, the world is full of pain and suffering, and then she becomes a slave for this king. And one day she leaves the gate open for the pigs, and I guess the pigs get out. So the king's like, who left the gate open? So like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, all these other slaves point at her, and then the king is like, you're the one who let it escape, and she's apologizing to him, but she can't even talk. They actually remove her tongue, which is brutal. And they're all looking at her. This is like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Like she's not wearing her mask. She didn't get her latest booster shot. That type of thing. So he says, "Okay, well then you're free. You're no longer my slave." So she goes, running away, and they obviously are playing a horrible trick on her, and they basically she basically gets like hunted at this point, and they hunt her for sport, and they're shooting arrows at her, and it's this horrible thing. So her life's basically as lowly as it gets. And just as she's on the brink of death, she finds this tree, and this tree is like the world tree. Am I getting a buffering issue? Okay, it's all right. And then at the bottom of this tree is this cave. And it's a pyramidal cave, so she enters into the North Pole mountain, under the mountain. And here we have the vine tentacles, and like this almost looks like apex dome at the top of the pyramid too, but definitely vine, cracking tentacles. And she goes through that, and then she slips inside of the tree, and she goes down into like the root system, and these roots are like the kraken tentacles as well. And then she plunges into this pool of water, and then she's basically drowning and can't breathe in the watery abyss. So she's down in the abyss, and she keeps going down and down. And as she's sinking, this entity finds her and starts swimming up towards her. And what does this look like? This is that plasma blue beam, spine looking Squatterman entity. It's not the shape of the Squatterman, but it's the shape of a different shape that the plasma takes if you looked at that guy's experiments, and different wall carvings and things from the past. So as she's sinking in the abyss, the Christ life energy finds her, and it attaches to her, and it basically turns her into God. And she's like the mother of all the titans and all that. So it's just like this, looks just like this, depiction of the blue beam in this Sumerian tablet. And it's just like this guy's Parat's experiments here with the plasma physics. So it attaches to her, and like I said, it turns her into a god basically, and then she forms this tree and this whole North Pole paradise area. And she continues then she goes back to the king, and she basically continues being his servant for a long period of time. And she even jumps in front of him and takes a spear for him, whereas he would have died if she didn't jump in front of him. But since she's like a god now, she just is able to resurrect, and she's fine. And then we can see here as she's building this place, the world tree, this plasma tree, takes different shapes, just like the different shapes of the Squatterman and the blue beam plasma, takes on Earth. and she continues to be this water bearer character, and she's building all these titans in what's essentially paradise, although it's a dark version of paradise. And she's doing it until the world ends. So Aaron hugs her, and he's like, I'll put an end to all this horribleness, just give me your strength. And this guy wanted something, Zeke wanted something else to happen. He wanted them to become sterilized to end the world, but Aaron wants to end the world in like a fiery Armageddon, basically. So he's like, do you want to stay here for eternity, or should I end the world? Um, and then Aaron's saying, are you the one who actually like led me here? Like was the whole story of Attack on Titan just you actually leading me to this place? You've been waiting the whole time, for a hero for 2,000 years, so this is alluding, and I understand the millennial reign of Christ stuff and the fake history and all that, but in general, 2,000 years ago is symbolic of when Jesus was last here, so Jesus would have been waiting for 2,000 years. So then this entity, this plasma blue beam, comes out in real life, and it reattaches Aaron's head to his body and resurrects him. So again, we have the plasma blue beam resurrecting somebody from the dead. Don't want to get too into this. The stream's already going on pretty long here. So then Aaron becomes this gigantic titan, and he basically symbolizes the dome and the kraken. And I'll show you that in the future too. And he brings about the destruction of the world. And notice how he turned the blue sky into a red sky. And one of his friends is saying Aaron has control of the founding titan now. And then this character, Mikasa, she can't hear what he's saying because they're saying the rumbling has begun. They've all been waiting for this rumbling. And when the world ends, it's going to be an extremely loud noise, so people won't be able to hear and all that. So she's saying, Aaron came home to be with us. So then he directs basically this giant wave of these titans that basically marches across the entire earth and destroys everything, which is symbolic of Armageddon. And I've mentioned this in the past, but I didn't mention it here yet. But the place that they're from is literally called Paradise, and it's a concentric circle map. So anyway, these titans are now marching across the whole earth in an effort to leave Paradise alone, and then the rest of the earth is being engulfed in this Armageddon event. So you have all these giant titans, and then Aaron's in the background as this giant like dome-shaped thing. So here you see the dome, and then this is the front of Aaron's new body, and he's basically like a spider and like the kraken with the long hair. So when you see like this long hair like this is like the kraken tentacles. And this is crazy looking. I know, but this is how the story ends with he becomes like this giant founding titan. But the reason they made him look like this is because he's symbolic of the dome and the kraken. And they're saying the monster was born, and now it's marching our hatred right back towards us. So this is the fate that the rest of the world is going to experience if they don't, wake up soon and get with Jesus and the truth and, become one of the saints to be in the camp. So this character is like, it's here, so you see they still have the blue sky, but then here comes the mist and the storm and the end of the world, the plasma apocalypse basically, and it's turning the sky red. So you see the red. So this woman's like, it's here, isn't it? It's judgment day has come for us. So all these people are running away from this Armageddon, storm, essentially. And this is interesting too, because they're showing how these titans are just trampling the entire earth, but they left this little, pocket of survival. And this is something that we see a lot with all the melted buildings and stuff, where like a whole castle might have been turned into a mountain because all the brick and everything melted and the cement and everything melted into a mountain shape. But there might be like a little part of it where you could still see the bricks or a door or a window or something. And it's a telltale sign that wasn't always a mountain. It used to actually be a castle or something. So here they're showing Aaron, basically the outside of the dome being bombarded with all these explosions and smoke, tentacles and stuff, which I'll show you here. So they have these airships. They're trying to attack Aaron. And here, this is basically what the end of the world is going to look like, where you have the dome and then all the, the kraken tentacles raining down onto the earth. And this is just like what we see in the Phantom Menace at the end of that. So you have the Gungan people putting up this protective dome over them, like the Camp of the Saints. It even kind of looks like hexagon patterns. And then the Kraken army of the dead, they're like a hive mind group of robots, they shoot these um, missiles at the dome. So it's just like Aaron's dome being hit with these, you know, smoke tentacles, basically. And the same thing happens with Harry Potter. At the end, the teachers put up this protective dome, just like in the Phantom Menace. They put it up over over the North Pole Castle, the North Pole Island, and then it's kind of hard to see, but this is Voldemort with the evil witches, and they're all shooting their um, smoke tentacles from like the Kraken army at the dome. So it's just the same symbolism in Harry Potter as well. And then in the Avengers, they have the same thing where they put a dome over Wakanda, and then what's his name? Thanos's army is like the Kraken army of the dead, and they're shooting all these missiles at the dome again. So it's the same thing here. So we have Star Wars, we have Harry Potter, we have the Avengers. These are all the biggest stories of our time, and they all have the exact same ending basically. And here's like the smoke tentacle Kraken coming down onto the earth. And this is the movie Armageddon. So they're not showing a dome, they're just showing New York City. But here's the smoke tentacles hitting the city. The same symbolism. Here they're hitting the Twin Towers, and this is what's left of the Twin Towers. Same thing with the movie Greenland. There doesn't have to be like a dome involved, but the end of the world is always these plasma smoke Kraken tentacles coming down onto the earth. And the movie Greenland is all about these people fleeing for safety towards the north. They're trying to get into a bunker near the North Pole. And the same thing happens at the end of Metal Gear Solid. So the main character has to face this giant robot called the Sahelanthropus, and every move this robot does is symbolic of something that's going to be happening during Armageddon. So he has a move where he throws this canister on the ground, and it turns the sky from this blue to red. And then when the red sky happens, all these smoke tentacles come raining down onto the earth. So you're seeing what's happening during Armageddon here. And his main weapon is literally the blue beam. So he charges up this blue beam and then fires it. And if it hits you, it's like a one-shot kill thing. So it's the opposite. But basically what they're saying is everything this robot does is something that's going to be happening during Armageddon because it's the final battle of the game and of the franchise. And then it's later revealed that this robot is being puppeteered by this this kid who's in like a Kraken outfit with the long sleeves and all that, and he's wearing the mask. And he's it's like a telekinesis thing, but it's like basically the devil puppeteering it essentially. And then at the end of the Indiana Jones franchise, the Dial of Destiny, the heroes fly through this portal to another world, or they conquer basically space and time. And when they get to this place, it's a battle that's happening, I think, around 200 BC. And I'll be talking about this movie actually in the next stream quite a bit. But this battle is between the Romans and the Greeks. And when they get there, they're firing all these Kraken tentacles at each other. So they're not exactly coming down from the sky, but they are coming down to the earth. They're being shot and then coming down. And you could see this whole battle as it takes place at the end of the movie is just these Kraken smoke tentacles everywhere because they're showing Armageddon. And this is Indiana Jones, so these are all the biggest stories that everyone's heard of pretty much. And they're basically there to meet Archimedes, and Archimedes is symbolic of God, but I'll be getting into that in the future. So they're basically meeting God at the Camp of the Saints during, the Kraken tentacle Armageddon apocalypse. So here in the Sonic the Hedgehog movie, Sonic represents, Jesus, the CV spiked ball, and the blue beam also, like we've seen with many of these other characters, like Godzilla, for instance. So Sonic, as the blue beam, he at the end of the movie faces off against the Dr. Robotnik, and Robotnik has like a hive mind army of robots, just like in Star Wars Phantom Menace. And at the end of the movie, it's the blue beam versus all these Kraken smoke tentacles that he's shooting at him. So here's the blue beam charging up and running towards the Kraken, smoke tentacles. And then here's the blue beam shooting at the Kraken. And also here's like the 2-0 portal thing, like similar with like that Squatterman symbolism. And then he curls up, into the spiked ball and hits Robotnik, and then he breaks the glass. So this is the breaking of the dome firmament. So the blue beam breaking the firmament and also splitting between this into the center of the Kraken, so the tentacles go everywhere else. And just one second. All right, so this is Lord of the Rings, another one of the biggest stories ever. And at the end of the story, they have Mount Doom. So this is, of course, the volcanic mountain at the center of the Earth, just like the volcano in Joe versus the volcano. And at the end, what is it doing? It's spitting out all these Kraken smoke tentacles onto the Earth. So what you're basically seeing here is Armageddon. And Frodo even says to Sam while they're sitting on the side of the volcano at the end, I'm glad you're here with me at the end of all things, because they're not talking about the end of their story. It is the end of their story, but they're talking about the end of the world. And then who comes to save them at the end of the world from all these Kraken tentacle, smoke plumes everywhere, is the three, points of light, these three eagles with Gandalf, who's the Jesus character. So Jesus basically comes to save the heroes during Armageddon. And the same thing with this is the first Godzilla movie that came out when they started redoing all these big Godzilla movies in 2014. So you have all these soldiers up in this plane, and they're going to jump out onto basically where Godzilla is. And so here you have and they have like this smoke attached to them. So they're the smoke, tentacles coming down from the top of the sky, and they're raining down onto the earth. And then Godzilla is representative of the blue beam. So it's basically the same thing in Sonic the Hedgehog. It's all the same symbolism. It's just told to us in different ways through different stories. So here's the smoke tentacles coming down onto the earth. So what you're seeing is Armageddon. These are all depictions of Armageddon. So the smoke tentacles coming down, and then here's Godzilla. It's kind of hard to see, but the smoke tentacles coming down all around him, and here he is roaring. And of course, Godzilla represents the blue beam, as shown in this picture, where he curls up into a spiked ball like Sonic the Hedgehog. He also shoots the blue beam out of his mouth. And here in this poster, they have the circle around him, like the North Pole. And then he's shooting it up through like this cloud barrier, but this is like the blue beam shooting up through the dome. And we also see this at the end of I Pet Goat too. So what you're seeing is depictions of the end of the world. So you have Jesus being born back into the world, and at the same time, you have the Kraken tentacles shooting out all around him. So basically, what you have here is the blue beam shooting towards this, concentric circle apex dome, and then the Kraken tentacles shooting out all around him into the rest of the world. And here, one of the Kraken tentacles hits the top of this pyramid and explodes it, and it makes even more plumes of smoke. And they also show this too earlier in I Pet Go 2 when these spaceships, which I think are symbolic of the needles, they drop bombs onto this dome, which is symbolic of our heads, but it's also symbolic of the world, of course. And when they do, the Kraken tentacles come shooting up out of it onto the city. And then we also have the black goo bats coming out of the cave under the dome. Essentially, I've talked about this a lot. There's so much to I Pet Go 2. It's basically a depiction of the world script again, though. And at the end is Armageddon, which is just like what's happening here at the end of Attack on Titan. And then we have some survivors in Attack on Titan, and they're on this tabletop mountain, which is symbolic of the Camp of the Saints at the North Pole also. And they're waiting. Then this Armageddon event is happening, basically all around them. It's coming closer to them. And this guy's even saying, I'm certain these two characters are alive on Paradise Island. And then there's a lot to this. I mean, I could just keep talking about this story for like hours, frankly. But what happens basically is one of the characters literally turns into the atom bomb, like I showed you guys in The Boys, how Kimiko turned into the atom bomb to stop Homelander. So this character turns into an atom bomb also, and the atom bomb explodes right on top of Aaron and that dome and all that Kraken, and that's what brings about the end of this Armageddon event, basically. And then this is also like the Phoenix bird who rescues the heroes, and just some clips of the chapters in this story. So this chapter was called "The Battle of Heaven and Earth." So we have the merging of the worlds, heaven and earth, all that Vesica Pisces symbolism that you could check out in previous live streams. Then the next chapter is a long dream, And I think this world is we're basically in a long dream. And then the final chapter of the whole show or the whole story is toward the tree on that hill. So this is like the Shawshank. This is, the world tree on the top of the hill, going to the North Pole, returning to the blue beam, to paradise, to the Garden of Eden, to the Tree of Life. And at the end of Attack on Titan, at the credits, they show this character walking, and the name of the song is called "Under the Tree." And he's walking. You could see his footsteps walking towards the tree on top of the hill, and they replaced the tree with the blue beam plasma tree because it's the same thing. And then they also show the two of the main characters talking by the northern lights. This is again symbolic of the North Pole. There's really no reason for them to show this aside from saying that, hey, this is happening. This is a North Pole story. And then Aaron erases his friends' memories for a certain reason. He basically meets with them, but then erases their memory because they need their memories to be erased in order to do what they need to do. And then once they're done doing what they need to do, their memories are returned to them. So I think that's actually what God has been doing with us, frankly. He says, once everything is over, you'll remember again. He says, I know. And then Aaron has to sacrifice himself at the end of the story to bring about, peace for the camp of the saints, basically. And then Mikasa is saying, you got your memories back of the times Aaron came to see us. And at the end of the whole story, when they show the credits, it's all about this world tree. And they show the different seasons and things of the world tree. And this just keeps going on, these credits, and they just show this world tree. And then after the credits are over, they show the world, hundreds or, maybe even like 1,000 years later. They show the waterfall and what the world looks like after that previous end of the world, that previous reset. And they showed these new characters. And it's a boy and his dog, kind of like A Boy and His Dog, the movie. And he finds this world tree, and he finds that, cave that Amira went into, the slave girl who found the blue beam originally, who got the godlike powers and started the whole story in the first place. So again, we see a new character whose name we don't even know, and he's starting the whole story over again because this is like a reset, cataclysmic cycle of the earth, and then it's all going to start again. And that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be the exact same story over and over again, but it has the same elements over and over again. And like I said, it goes between Christ and Antichrist rule of the world. So that's the end of the Attack on Titan story, and just to show you how this plasma tree has different shapes, and they even show it like moving, like a plasma would. And of course, this shape is like this shape, and you might recognize it too. Just one second. And you might recognize this seal from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusades. So this seal is what's at the final North Pole destination of the story, where they show this. This is essentially that, I mean, you could see it as like a triple cross, but that doesn't really make sense in the context of the story. What they're showing is the big nail, or the tent peg, as Jay Dreamers calls it, and it's got the plasma offshoots coming off. So basically, it's the symbol for the blue beam, and this is the seal at the center of the world. And it's Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. This is where they get to the North Pole Mountain. Then Indy has to face the tests, the trials. He walks in between the twin pillars. Then here's the spider webbing for the Kraken. I mean, the spider symbolizes the Kraken. He has to be penitent and humble. He has to kneel. So one of the things we have to do as heroes is be humble and repentant. And then next, he has to walk in the Word of God, which you guys probably remember, the Jehovah spelled with an I thing. So he has to follow God's path. And then the last thing he has to do is take a leap of faith over this abyss. And when he takes the leap of faith, he realizes he's actually standing on a bridge. So he crosses the bridge over the abyss into this cave. And there's a whole Vesica Pisces mural thing and stuff over here, which I'm not showing right now. But he meets the knight, who's like a godlike figure. He's supernatural. He's got the symbol. It's a more like complete symbol. It actually looks like the top of the Squatterman, with the upward apex dome, inverted dome area at the top, like the blue beam shooting up through it, and the cross, obviously. And then Indy and the knight meet, and he gets offered the sword. So this is the blue beam being offered to him. And then through his humility, he has to choose which is the real holy grail out of all these other examples. So he doesn't choose the gaudy looking, gold and diamond encrusted one that the villain chose, because the villain has no spiritual discernment. But Indy has spiritual discernment and humility, so he's able to recognize what the real holy grail looks like. So he takes the grail and he drinks from it, and then the knight says, "You have chosen wisely." So he uses his wisdom and his humility. And this is, like, I think, like from the Bible, where it says, in order to, I'm paraphrasing, but in order to get to heaven, you have to be, you need like the wisdom of the serpent, but also the be as gentle as like a lamb as well. You can't be like left pillar oriented and wise and reach heaven. You have to be right pillar oriented, not the wolf but the lamb. And then he resurrects his father. His father was about dead pretty much, but he resurrects him with the Holy Grail. So here again is the resurrection of the father, or God, character. And then they also show Elsa, so she has the L in her name, and this is kind of like a blue beam, light here, and she gets the Grail, but she doesn't have spiritual discernment. She's not humble and all that, and she crosses the seal when she shouldn't have, because you can't take this eternal life away from the North Pole. It stays at the North Pole area. So she wants to steal it basically, and then the earthquake happens, the end of the world, and then she ends up falling down into the abyss. So she's trying to, keep reaching for this, physical world, this eternal life and all that. And then she ends up falling into the abyss. But then Indy, instead of falling into the abyss, his father tells him to let it go, let go of the physical world, let go of these, desires that you may have for, earthly things. And then you won't fall into the abyss. And he pulls him up. All right. So I'll end it on this show from. My voice is pretty shot here, but I think I could finish. So this is a really interesting poster, and this show is awesome. It is very dark, and there's like horrific violence in the show. Unfortunately, I mean, I don't really mind it, but I know a lot of people do. So don't watch it if you don't like horror type stuff. Um, but the show is amazing. It's kind of like the new Lost, in my opinion. And it's basically about a group of people who get trapped in this town and they can't leave the town. So if they try to drive out of the town, they end up just driving right back into the same town. So they're trapped in this town. And during the day, everything's kind of normal. But at night, all these crazy monsters who look like humans come out of the forest. And if they catch you, they kill you in like this, horrific way. But they look like monsters, but they're like imposter humans. They're shapeshifters. So on this cover, what you're basically seeing here is this is the main character Boyd. He's also from Lost. His name is Harold Perrineau, and he played Michael in Lost. And he's like kind of like he's the Jesus character for sure, and he's like kind of the glue that holds the whole town together. It's him and this other woman. They're basically like the two figureheads of the town, and her name is Donna. I'll be showing you guys. And in this poster, this is not just like a cross, it's also the X in the circle, because this is a North Pole story. And if you look at it from, tilted a little bit, it's the blue beam shooting up, and it shoots up into this main house here, which is called the Colony House. And this is the North Pole house location of the show, which I'll show you guys. And also, it's kind of interesting too that from backwards is the word morph, which means to transform. And there's a lot of transformation and evolution symbols in the world script and in the Mandela effect as well. Like even the logo for Transformers now, the A is a delta, an open delta shape instead of an A, which is symbolic of the doorway. So passing through the doorway or the portal is how we transform or morph. This is also brought to us by MGM Plus, and I think that these pluses at the end of the streaming services are also North Pole references. Because see, like how this is like the North Pole, this like plus sign or this X in a circle. This is also like the North Pole. So you have like MGM Plus, you got Paramount Plus, you got Disney Plus, and Apple Plus. I think it's all because they're saying that they're putting out these stories that are North Pole stories, or stories from the North Pole, and all their names represent the North Pole too. So like, what's MGM? It's the MM. So that's the split mountain, the Mount Meru, and then in the center is the G. And that's like on some old maps, like this Urbano Monte map, you have the G right in the center of the map. So right here, you have North Pole area, and this is like that Star of Bethlehem shape, like I was showing you in Joe versus Volcano and a bunch of other things. And you have the Mountain right here with the G in the center. And then also you could look at this like it's the Apple, like Apple Plus. Disney is the castle in the X. So that's like the North Pole. Paramount is the North Pole Mountain under the Star Dome. So they're all representative of this North Pole area, and they're all telling us these North Pole stories for us to remember what we need to remember before the end of the world. So these are like the main characters are from. This is that Donna woman, and these are like the imposters that come out of the woods at night, and their goal is to just find whoever they can, and then they're like the most monstrous, like evil beings you can imagine. Like they like to taunt people and they torture people and they draw things out. And sometimes they don't kill somebody because it makes things even worse. It's really an intense show, but if you can handle stuff like that, it's really good. It's awesome. It's an awesome show. It's like the only show I'm kind of interested in watching at the moment. And so, like, inside of their house, these imposters aren't allowed to come in unless you invite them in. If you have the light, if you have the blue beam in your house, which I'll show you in a minute. I talked about it at the beginning of the video too. But she's like, "Oh, let me in." We could be like, boyfriend and girlfriend and all that. And she's like trying to, seduce this other guy who's on the inside of the house into letting her in because that's all that they want is. And this is like the vampire symbolism, let me in, that type of thing. So we need to like either let God or Christ into our temple, or we're going to be letting the Antichrist or the devil Kraken into our temple. So there's a point in I'll just show you like some things from the story that show how this is, that they put so many elements of the world script into these stories. So there's a point where they kill one of these imposters, and in the daylight they can't really do anything. They only come out at night, so they have this dead body of this monster just laying there. So they go out to look at it, and this is what they actually look like when they're not shapeshifting into a person. So they're like, "Oh, you really did it. You really killed one of them." And this woman, she's basically like the head doctor of the group. She was like a nurse, and her name is Christy. So again, we have like the Christ Christy symbolism with the doctor. And Boyd, the main character, they're like, what do we do with the body? So he's like, we take it inside. And now this girl, she's Christy's girlfriend, and so they're together, and her name is Mary. I think it's actually Marielle. So what they have here with that couple is, Christ or Christy, and then she's also a nurse, and she's like Mary and Elle. So she's like the Mary, the Mountain, or the Mother Mary and Christ, and they're both like the doctor figures in the show. But then Kenny, he's like the sheriff's deputy, like Boyd's like the sheriff, and he's like the deputy, and he's like, tell me you're joking. So Christy's like, this is our chance to learn about them. Let's bring it in, to the house. So then Kenny's like, can we talk about this for a second? So she's like, what is there to talk about? And he's like, you're about to willingly bring something evil into your home. Do you understand that? And she's like, I do, but we may never get this opportunity again. So they decide to bring the entity into their home, and it ends up being a bad thing to do. So here's like another scene from the show where these two are a couple. This is Boyd's son, and his name is Ellis. So again, another character with the EL in his name. And this woman, Fatima, they're about to get married, but they're having like kind of like a fight. So she walks away, and then this guy's like, trouble in paradise. But again, this paradise, Adam and Eve symbolism. And then there's a scene later where Ellis gets stabbed by accident. So they're trying to rush him out, and it happens at night, unfortunately. So they have to rush him out to get him to Christy, the doctor. So they put him in this car to drive to the hospital area, and he's saying that he can't breathe. So again, we have the symbol of or the story element of the black man who can't breathe. This is like the George Floyd thing, and it's not that they're emulating George Floyd. It's that I think this came out actually before the George Floyd thing, but either way, it doesn't matter because it's an element of the world script. The George Floyd thing wasn't real either. It happened because because the world script plays out on the world stage as well. So Mary and Christy are also having a fight, and here you can see her name is Christy, And there's another character named Elgin, which I'll show you here soon. He's got the EL in his name as well. And her name is Mary, and they're trying to get her to open the doors because people don't want to open their doors at night, obviously, because of these imposter monsters. But occasionally there's like an emergency or something where they have to. And then Christy and Jesus, they're putting the name Jesus in the same, thing. And this is Elgin here, and they're bringing him inside, and he can't breathe. So she's saying, Ellis, are you okay? And he's saying, I can't breathe, and he says, I can't breathe over and over again. This is literally like the George Floyd thing, but it's because it's an element of the world script. It's not because of Floyd. So then after she patches him up and gets the blood out of his lung and stuff, he says, oh, I can breathe. So what happened was the Jesus character saved him and also made it so that he can breathe. So she's happy about that. Good. Now this is like the main family of the story, and this is what I was talking about earlier too, where one of the characters made all these drawings of things that he wanted to remember, but they're from a long time ago. So this is like us looking at the cave paintings or carvings of the Squatterman, and they're trying to make sense out of these drawings. So what you see here, I mean, this is like the North Pole symbol with the blood over it, but also the yellow and blue symbolism. And then here we have like the dome symbolism, the fishbowl or snow globe, and all that. There's so much in this show. I'm just kind of breezing through a few things, but this is that colony house that symbolizes the temple or the building at the North Pole, and they have a barber pole. Like, there's no reason for them to have this barber pole here, but it's to symbolize to anyone in the know that this is a North Pole location. And this is also a Mandela effect because barber poles used to just be red and white, like North Poles. Like if you see like a North Pole, like in the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer story or something, it'll be like a red and white striped pole. But now, and barber poles used to be that way too. But now barber poles have the blue stripe also. And I think this is the addition of the blue beam spiral at the North Pole. So here you have the Ellis and Fatima doing the M handhold at the garden. This is like their, greenhouse garden at the North Pole location. And here's another scene where they're talking about making a communications tower to try to talk to people, or which is symbolic of trying to talk to God at this, to try and save them from this place. So this guy's like, I think if we get it over the tree line and we give it enough power, we could get a signal out. So then this guy's like, well, how do you propose we get it over the tree line? And he's like, we start by going to higher ground. So by getting to higher ground, they have to go to the top of the North Pole temple or the North Pole castle or the North Pole mountain. And they're putting up this communications tower at the North Pole, which is in all these stories. It's in Lost, it's in Stranger Things, and excuse me, plenty of stuff that I've talked about in the past. And here we have everyone, they're happy about getting this communications tower up at the top of the North Pole. They're all excited about it. They're even kind of like making like the Squatterman type of pose with the family here. So they're all excited about this. But then this woman notices that a storm is coming. And here again with the storm symbolism. And when they notice the storm, this character, Jade, he walks by the sun and his head eclipses the sun. So we have this merging of worlds. This also, North Pole symbolism. You also have the X's here too as well. So whenever you see a character walking in front of the sun or walking in front of a light like that, it's a eclipse symbolism. So they're trying to communicate, even though the storm is going on, because this might be the only chance that they have to do it. So they're trying to communicate at the North Pole Tower during the storm, and they put up the small dome over themselves, like the Camp of the Saints, and this is like the blue and white Columbia coloring. And then when the storm starts hitting, their lights or their lamps start exploding into sparks. So this character Boyd, when he's introduced, they're singing this song, If I Had a Boat, so he wants his vessel, and he's the Christ character, and he's often wearing like the light blue colors or the yellow and blue colors. And the name Boyd, when I looked it up, the first thing you get is this yellow-haired or fair-haired, and that doesn't really describe why they would call this guy Boyd. But what I found interesting, too, is there's another explanation for his name from the Isle of Bute. So I looked up what the name Bute means, and basically what it means is it's hard to read on these things. Where is this? Oh, up here. So the Isle of Bute, So it's basically the island of fire, or like the beacon fire. So this is like the whole pyramid, or like how Jay Dreamers talks about, like pyramid starts with the PYR, which means, fire basically, or like the fire mountain, that volcanic mountain. It also means light, so the light coming from that mountain. So Boyd symbolizes, someone from this, fire, beacon fire, island. And it also can be like victory or corn, and corn comes up a lot too with like crown and corona and all that as well. So this is when he was driving to the. They didn't realize they were going there, but they were. This is how they got to the village that you can't escape from, and he's with his family. This is his wife and son in the background, or in the back of the car. And he says they're talking and having a good time, and he's like, "You know what they used to call me in the army, right? They used to call him Mister Fish and Loaves." So this is basically like a funny nickname for Jesus, basically, because Jesus has these, parables of where he's, got the fish and the loaves of bread and all that. And he's saying, they would send him to any base to set it up. And no matter what they gave him, no matter what resources, he would make it work. Mr. Fish and Loaves. And here's Ellis in the back. And then he said they used to call mom Iron Abbey. Um, and then he's making a joke about how she's, kind of relentless and doesn't bend and all that, like iron. And then what happens, unfortunately, is she ends up going crazy, so she has like the iron element, and she goes, crazy, and has to be killed, unfortunately, in the village that they end up in. But Boyd, continues on and perseveres, and he's like, the savior figure of everyone in the place, the Jesus character. So they give him a boat, but just as he gets his boat, they hit this snag in the road where there's this tree that blocks the road, and this tree is what every person sees when they get stuck in the village. So basically, what it is it's the dead world tree. So when you see this dead world tree, or when it blocks your path, that means you're stuck in like the Antichrist, inverted, evil, North Pole world. So they're driving through this town and they can't get out of it, and Ellis says, Jesus, that's grim. And they look at this place and it says, save us on the wall. So they don't know what they're getting into. And their worlds are merging now. So we have the eclipse happening at the top of the car here. And then this preacher who lives in the town, he stops their car and he's like, I need you to just listen to me. I know this sounds crazy, but it's going to be dark soon. And when darkness comes, all these monsters are going to come out of the woods, and you need to get to safety right now. And that obviously sounds crazy to someone who doesn't know what he's talking about. But, these people have been living in this town and they're just trying to survive every night. So they hear the screeching of the monsters coming. So Boyd's like, all right, I don't trust you, but let's see what's going on here. So they hide underground when the monsters are running amok, during the night. And these are basically, the heroes of the story. So Boyd, he doesn't like this situation where they have to, hide every night and they have no like recourse against these monsters. So he goes out into the woods, oftentimes, to try to like, find things that might help. And he finds the ultimate thing that might help, which is the blue beam and the Squatterman. So he gets stuck out in the woods at night, and these monsters are coming, and he falls backwards into this North Pole mountain, which I'll show you. So he falls backwards into the mountain, and these, imposters are right outside, but they can't get in. So he's like, why can't they get in here to kill me? So he sees that there's these talismans all over inside of this North Pole mountain, symbolic area. So he takes one off the wall, and it looks like this. And this is the Squatterman symbol. And I'm not sure like what these F symbols are. It's not like an F because it has 3 bars, but I think there's 8 of them. If you have an idea of what they mean, definitely put it in the comments or the chat or something. But also, you have like the 2 sides here. It kind of looks like the sun and the moon, frankly, like the twin pillars. But this is also, of course, like the Squatterman shape, which I showed you guys in the past. So he's, realizing that these talismans are keeping the imposters, the evil monsters away, and it's because they're symbolic of the blue beam. So by having the blue beam in your house, you're able to keep this evil away, which is, what's also going to happen at the North Pole, where the blue beam is, this, Kraken, Antichrist, terraforming of the earth and all the crazy stuff that's going to happen in Armageddon, it's not going to be able to penetrate into that Camp of the Saints area under the small dome. So he's showing someone where he found these talismans, and it's this place here, which is kind of like, it's obviously not like a huge mountain or anything, but it's this place in the middle of nowhere within like a circular area, and it's like this black rock that's covered in green, so like the green land, but on top of the black rock, like I showed you in Joe versus the volcano, where he's got like the golf green, on top of the North Pole islands. And then if you go into the cave in this North Pole mountain, this is where the talismans are, where the blue beam is. So the blue beam is found into and under the mountain, which is also where the Ymir character in Attack of the Titan, that's where she finds the blue beam also, because it's all the same story. It's just told to us and shown to us in different ways. So then there's a part where Donna, who's the other, pillar of the community, she has a heart attack. So Kenny comes running to the hospital, and he's like, Christy, Donna had a heart attack. You need to, come and help her. So they all go to try to help her, and they have the, the defibrillator paddles and all that. And they're trying to bring her back to life, and it's not working. So Boyd is like, come on, hit her again. And he's got like his yellow and blue outfit here. So the doctors are saying, it's been too long, she's not going to come back to life, but he's the Jesus character. So, everyone's thinking that she's dead, but he's like, you don't die until I say you're dead. He basically needs her to help run the town, or else everyone's just going to go crazy. So he just keeps, doing CPR to her, and then he gets her to come back to life. So the Jesus character resurrects her, and now she's back alive again. And then at the end of the third season, they introduced this villain who's basically like the guy running the show, and he's essentially the Satan character, and he wears this yellow suit, and he's very menacing. But then at the beginning of the newest season, which is the current fourth season, they show him he's a shapeshifter, and he shapeshifts into this girl here. So anyone looking at her wouldn't think that she's like, this like ultimate evil person. And she just pretends to be the daughter of this preacher. So, this like, sweet, innocent, preacher's daughter and all that, she's like totally unassuming, and everyone just trusts her. And meanwhile, she's a shapeshifter, devil, basically. And this is also, what I think is going on in a lot of like churches. I think a lot of church leaders are actually, Satanists in disguise. They go through the whole program and pretend to be preachers, and they do it all just to lead people astray. And that's what she's doing here, or he's doing. So, she's pretending not to know what's going on, and she's pretending to be a new person into this town, because anyone from anywhere could just wind up in this town. You don't have to be in like a certain spot. All you have to do is run into that dead tree, and then all of a sudden you're stuck in this town. So she's asking Kenny, do the monsters, they come out every night? Yeah. But these rocks protect you. So he's like, yeah, we call them talismans. So she's like, how do they work? So he's like, oh, don't touch it. Don't take it off the window. They have to be hanging for it to work. So she's just playing dumb. She knows all the answers already. So, she's asking, how does it work? He says they don't know, because he doesn't understand that it's, symbolic of the blue beam, obviously. So he's like, I know how it must all sound. But then she starts quoting the Bible. She says, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness shall not overcome it. So she's calling that talisman the light, because it represents the blue beam. It's the Squatterman. And then he's like, well, what's that? So she says, John 1:5, from the Bible. It means God is with us, even here. How else can you explain such a magical thing to keep the darkness at bay? So it's very interesting, because this is basically like the devil, or Satan, speaking to him, and it shows his awareness of all the good and evil too. It's interesting, actually. So she's like, will you pray with me? And he's like, he's basically like an atheist. So she's like, it's okay. God still listens. So they start praying, and she's like, Lord, please protect us in this dark place where evil roams so free, where evil roams so freely. Please stand by she's pretending that her father, this preacher, was actually her father, but she's actually the one who kills him. And she, obviously, like I said, she's a shapeshifter. She's somebody else. Let him wake renewed in your love, and please rest your hand upon the shoulders of these people trapped here in this place who have taken us in and shown us such kindness. Be with them tonight, Lord, and let your love, give them rest. This we ask in your name, amen. So it's just showing how, like it said, the devil can quote scripture. It's just because somebody sounds like they're, spiritual and holy and all that, you need to use your spiritual discernment for yourself and decide if people are telling the truth or they're for real or not. And this is a great back and forth piece of dialogue here that I just wanted to share with you guys. So this character has been through a lot, and her father was killed and all that, and she's basically, turned to be like a pessimist. And she says, every time someone here feels like they have a purpose or that they've discovered the truth, they end up dead. And then here's the Elgin character who had, I don't want to get into it, but his eye was taken out. And he says, but there is a truth here. I mean, there has to be. And she says, why? Why can't the whole place just be like, some random, cruelty that exists for no reason other than to just, be cruel? And there are a lot of people with this, disposition. And she says, look, I know you want to believe that this is all some part of God's plan. And he's like, I do. She's like, okay, great. So explain to me why you don't have an eye. And he's like, we're all being tested. And she's like, part of your test is being mutilated. So like we all have to go through all these, traumatic, horrible things, illnesses, injuries, loss of family members. But it is just a really difficult test. And then she realizes that she's being kind of a jerk, even though she has gone through a lot. So he's like, look, there's a truth behind all of this. And then he says, you know how this place wins? It's by throwing so many lies at you that you don't believe the truth, even when it's staring you right in the face. So that's really what our world is doing to us. It's thrown so many lies at us that a lot of people basically just gave up. But that doesn't mean there isn't a truth to this world, and that's what we're remembering and finding here with all this inside of all this truth media. And here's, the truth, the Squatterman and the blue beam. And I think that's the end of the presentation. And my voice is pretty shot. Sorry, I haven't been keeping up with the chat. Sorry, I guess I missed a lot. I was kind of on a roll there. Plus, I knew it was going to be a long presentation, so I was trying to get through it before my voice gave out, which it about is ready to do. Hey, Tanya, good to see you. Oh yeah, I'll have to check out your guys' chats here later. Yeah, I've heard of the FPV Angel channel. I haven't really checked it out yet. I feel like they have like a whole model of the Earth and all that, but I haven't really checked it out yet. Yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate that. I don't think I'll have time to read all these chats though. I definitely appreciate you guys chatting, and please thumb the video up if you're still here. I think YouTube kind of lowers the thumbs up though. I feel like I used to get like easily over like 100 thumbs up, and now it doesn't even make 100. So I feel like they're just trying to make the channel, seem as small as possible. Whatever. I mean, it's all part of the game. Hey, Ghetto's back. Nice. Yeah, it's a lot of stuff. I don't want to have time to read it all. It's awesome though. I'm glad you guys are here. Yeah, Matthew. He seems to know all about Attack on Titan. Maybe we're the one. Maybe we talked before about Attack on Titan. If you're maybe the one that was saying that the Mandela effect of the title really affected you. I forget who that was. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, Matthew's saying he was atheist until he learned the Mandela effects are communicative changes from the creator. Jesus as the logos absolutely exists because the changes communicate that. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. I was never like religious or anything. I did always kind of think there was a God and a point to everything, but aside from that, I never gave it any thought really. But yeah, between the Mandela effect and the flat shape of the Earth, I'm totally on board now. And I've also had a lot of things happen in my life, which I'll be talking about in future live streams. Some of the stuff you guys won't believe, like, the stuff I've been sitting on for, like, years, just, like, waiting to show you guys. Some of it's, amazing, but, we just gotta get there. Oh, Alvar. Hey, what's up, Alvar? Do I think Trump will gather the armies of the world to advance on the North Pole? Yes, I do. I think that's why Trump is so interested in Greenland and why the United States bought Alaska and why China is taking over so much of Canada. I think that they're all getting ready to make their move on the North Pole when this happens. When this happens, it might be like an instantaneous thing, you know. So we might just be like transported to the North Pole. I don't know how it's going to go down exactly. We might also have to, you know, travel there ourselves. So it's going to be something, and it's going to be relatively soon. Oh, that's cool, Matthew. Yeah, you could email me whenever you want. Hey, Fido Maker, what's up, man? Oh, it's interesting what you're saying about the hyphen. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting how we need to give consent to things. Yeah, like if the devil's forces, could just kill us, they would have. But we're under God's protection. That's not the way this world works. There's rules. You're welcome, Andrew. Cage Fighter, always good to see you. Hey, Hey, Four Jacks, what's up, man? Yeah, good to see you guys. Thanks, guys. Pitchfork and Dust, Soldier for Jesus. Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, yeah, you guys can email me. Just please try to keep it short. I mean, I appreciate anyone who emails me, but sometimes people email and it's like this, like 10-page thing, and I just don't really have time for that. Uh, hey, Rolly, good to see you. All right, guys. I think I'll end it there. It's another 3-hour live stream. All right. All right, guys. Well, I guess I'll see you on the next one. And, until then, all the best and God bless.